The rope was already around her neck when Marcus Kane rode into Sheridan that morning. December 1874, Wyoming territory, the kind of cold that turns breath to ice before it leaves your mouth. The town square was packed despite the frozen mud, despite the wind that cut through wool coats like paper. They'd come to watch a woman hang. Clara Whitmore stood on a wooden platform hastily built beside the courthouse wrist, bound behind her back dress, torn at the shoulder where someone had grabbed her too hard. Her blonde hair, once pinned proper like a lady's should be, now hung loose and tangled with dried blood from a gash above her left eye. But it was her silence that unsettled the crowd most. No crying, no begging, just those green eyes scanning the faces below, like she was memorizing every last one of them for whatever comes after death. Clara Whitmore. Sheriff Raleig's voice boomed across the square. You stand convicted of theft, abandonment of your children, and suspicious dealings that led to your husband's death. The crowd erupted. Hang the witch, someone shouted. Child killer, screamed another. A rock sailed through the air, striking Clara's cheek. She didn't flinch. Blood trickled down to her collar, staining the white fabric crimson. Marcus pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the gathering. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, following rumors of a hanging, though he hadn't known whose. Now watching this woman stand there like a statue while the world spat its hatred at her, something cold settled in his chest. He'd seen plenty of hangings in his 35 years. This one was different. This one was wrong. Any last words? The sheriff asked, hand on the lever that would drop the floor beneath her feet. Clara lifted her chin. When she spoke, her voice carried clear across the square, steady as a preacher's on Sunday. My children are in a cave 10 miles north near Devil's Creek. They've been alone for 4 days. They have water, but no food. The girl's name is Rose. She's 8. The boy is Samuel. He's 6. Someone please. Enough lies. Raleigh yanked the lever, but the floor didn't drop. Marcus had shot the mechanism. The crack of his rifle echoed off the courthouse walls as he urged his horse forward through the stunned crowd. People scattered, unsure what was happening. Some reached for their own weapons, but hesitated, recognizing the rider. Marcus Kane wasn't a man you drew on lightly. He'd earned his reputation the hard way, tracking outlaws through territories where law didn't reach. The scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw told stories that made grown men look away. But it wasn't fear that parted the crowd now. It was confusion. Why would Marcus Kane, who hadn't shown his face in town for near 3 years, suddenly appear to stop a legal hanging, step away from the woman sheriff? Marcus said, dismounting with his rifle still trained on Raleig's chest. This is a lawful execution, Kane. You got no business here. I'm making it my business. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his coat with his free hand. This woman is my mail-order bride, contracted and paid for 6 weeks ago through the matrimonial news in San Francisco. That makes her my property under territorial law, and you're about to destroy what's mine. The silence that followed was complete. Even the wind seemed to pause. Sheriff Raleigh laughed harsh and disbelieving. You expect us to believe? I expect you to read. Marcus tossed the paper at the sheriff's feet. Date's right there, November 2nd. Payment receipt from Western Union. $20 sent to a Clara Whitmore of Boston for passage to Wyoming territory. Clara's eyes found Marcus for the first time. He saw confusion there, then a flicker of understanding. She was smart. She knew a lifeline when she saw one, even if she didn't understand why it was being thrown. This is horse shit. Raleigh snarled, but he picked up the paper, squinting at it. His face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. Even if this is real, it's real enough for Judge Patterson. Marcus interrupted. You want to test it? Go ahead. But territorial law says a contracted bride can't be executed without her intended husband's consent. And I don't consent. The crowd began to murmur. Some of the women whispered behind their hands. The men shifted restlessly, unsure whether to be angry or entertained by this unexpected turn. "She's a thief," Rayleigh tried again. "A child killer." "She's mine," Marcus said simply. "Cut her down." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Judge Patterson himself pushed through the crowd, his black robes billowing. He was a small man with the kind of careful movements that suggested he thought through every gesture twice before making it. He took the paper from Raleigh, adjusted his spectacles, and read it thoroughly. "This appears to be in order," he said finally. "The law is clear on this matter, Sheriff. Release the woman to Mr. Kane's custody." "Your Honor, you can't be serious. The law is the law." Patterson's voice carried the kind of finality that ended arguments. "Though I must say, Mr. Kane, you're taking on quite a responsibility. This woman has been convicted of serious crimes." "I'll manage my own household judge." Marcus climbed the platform stairs, each boot fall echoing in the strange quiet that had settled over the square. Up close, he could see Clara trembling, though whether from cold or fear or rage he couldn't tell. He pulled his knife and she tensed, but he only cut the rope from her neck, then the bonds on her wrists. "Can you ride?" he asked quietly. She nodded, rubbing her wrists where the rope had cut deep grooves. "Then let's go get your children." The journey north began in silence, Clara sitting in front of Marcus on his horse, her body rigid as a fence post against his chest. It wasn't until they'd left the last building of Sheridan behind that she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp as winter ice. "Why?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. How could he explain that he'd recognized something in her eyes on that platform? The same look he'd had 3 years ago, standing in the ashes of his burned home, his wife and daughter's bodies covered with blankets that couldn't hide how small they were. The look of someone who'd lost everything, but hadn't figured out how to stop breathing yet. "Because I know what it's like to be condemned for something that wasn't your fault," he said finally. Clara turned slightly, just enough that he could see her profile. "How do you know it wasn't my fault? A woman who uses her last words to beg for her children isn't the kind who abandons them. And thieves don't usually stand that straight when they're about to hang." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The paper, the mail order bride contract. It's fake. Good forgery, though. My brother was an artist with documents before he died." "So, what now? What do you really want?" Marcus pointed to a line of smoke rising in the distance. "Now we get your children before they freeze to death. After that, we'll figure out the rest." As they rode toward Devil's Creek, neither of them noticed the lone rider following at a distance, keeping just far enough back to avoid detection. Sheriff Raleigh had his own orders to follow, and they came from much higher up than Judge Patterson. Clara Whitmore was supposed to die today. That she hadn't was a complication that would need to be corrected. But first, Marcus Kane would have to be dealt with. The cave wasn't hard to find once they knew where to look. The children's footprints, small and desperate, led from the main path into a cluster of rocks that formed a natural shelter. Marcus heard them before he saw them, soft crying and a thin voice singing a lullaby trying to comfort. "Rose Samuel," Clara called out, sliding from the horse before Marcus could help her down. "It's Mama. I'm here." The crying stopped. Then 2 small figures burst from the cave entrance, running on unsteady legs toward their mother. Clara dropped to her knees and caught them pulling them against her so tight it looked like she was trying to merge them back into her own body. "You came back," the girl Rose said over and over. "You came back. You came back." The boy Samuel just clung to her, his face buried in her neck. Marcus stood back, holding the horse's reins, watching this reunion, with something twisting in his chest. His own daughter would have been about Rose's age now if she'd lived, would have had that same fierce way of holding on, like if she squeezed hard enough, nothing could ever separate them again. "Who's he?" Rose asked, suddenly pointing at Marcus with the kind of direct suspicion only children could manage. Clara hesitated, then said, "This is Mr. Kane. He helped me come find you." "Why?" Samuel's voice was small, muffled against Clara's shoulder. It was a fair question, one that would need answering eventually, but for now, Marcus just said, because it was the right thing to do. As he helped them all onto his horse, Marcus caught Clara looking at him with something that wasn't quite trust, but wasn't fear either. It was calculation maybe, or recognition. One survivor sizing up another, wondering if they'd found an ally, or just a different kind of danger. Time would tell which he'd prove to be. The wind howled through the valley like a wounded animal as Marcus Kane's ranch came into view, a cluster of weathered buildings huddled against the base of the mountain, as if seeking shelter from the endless Wyoming sky. It wasn't much to look at, a 2-story main house with a sagging porch, a barn that leaned slightly to the east, and a handful of outbuildings that had seen better decades. But the smoke rising from the chimney promised warmth, and after 2 days of riding through frozen hell, that was all that mattered. "Is this where we're going to live?" Samuel asked, his small voice barely audible over the wind. Marcus felt Clara tense against him. They hadn't discussed the details of their arrangement yet. Hell, they hadn't discussed much of anything beyond keeping the children alive. "For now," Marcus said, guiding the horse toward the barn. "Until your mother decides otherwise." The barn door protested on its hinges as he pushed it open. Inside, the sudden absence of wind felt like stepping into another world. The horse nickered softly, recognizing home. Marcus helped the children down first, then offered his hand to Clara. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers ice cold, even through her thin gloves. "There's a room upstairs in the house," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Used to be my daughter's. It's got 2 beds. You and the children can take it." Clara studied him for a moment. "Your daughter, she died 3 years back." The words came out flat, practiced. He'd said them enough times that they'd lost their sharp edges, worn smooth like river rocks. But Clara heard what was underneath. She'd had plenty of practice recognizing grief dressed up as indifference. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Marcus turned away, busying himself with the horse's saddle. "House is through that door, kitchen's on the left. Should be some preserved meat in the cellar, maybe some potatoes that aren't too far gone. Help yourself to whatever you find." "Mr. Kane, Marcus, if we're going to make this believable, you should probably use my given name." "Marcus." She tested the name carefully, like tasting unfamiliar food. "We need to discuss the terms of this arrangement." He finally looked at her, then really looked, even exhausted, half frozen and wearing a dress that had seen far better days. There was something about Clara Whitmore that commanded attention. Maybe it was the way she held herself spine straight despite everything. Or maybe it was those eyes, green as spring grass and twice as stubborn. "Tonight we get warm and fed," he said. "Tomorrow we talk terms." The house smelled of neglect and old smoke. Dust motes danced in the pale light, filtering through windows that hadn't been cleaned in months, maybe years. The furniture, what there was of it, was covered in sheets like ghosts, waiting for someone to acknowledge them. Clara stood in the doorway of the kitchen, taking inventory. The stove was good quality cast iron that would hold heat well once she got it going. The shelves were mostly bare, but she found flour lard, some questionable dried beans, and, miracle of miracles, a jar of preserved peaches that someone had tucked behind a tin of coffee. "Can we eat those?" Rose asked, pointing at the peaches. "After supper," Clara promised, rolling up her sleeves. "Samuel, can you bring me some wood from that pile by the door? Rose, there's a bucket by the pump outside. We'll need water." The children moved to their tasks without complaint. They'd learned over the past months that complaints didn't change. Anything didn't make food appear or fathers come back from the dead. Better to just do what needed doing. Marcus appeared in the doorway, arms full of split wood. "Pump's frozen. I'll need to thaw it. There's a barrel of water in the pantry for now." He built up the fire in the stove with practiced efficiency, and soon the kitchen began to warm. Clara found a cast iron pot relatively clean and started water boiling for the beans. It would take hours for them to be edible, but at least it was something. "Your husband," Marcus said suddenly. "How did he die?" Clara's hand stilled on the pot handle. "Why do you want to know?" "Because Sheriff Raleigh seemed pretty convinced you had something to do with it." She turned to face him, and for a moment he saw something dangerous flash across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by careful neutrality. "My husband was killed by men who wanted what he wouldn't give them. I was there when it happened. I couldn't stop it. That's all the truth I have, and it's more than you've earned the right to know." They stood there, sizing each other up like fighters before a bout. Then Samuel tugged on Marcus's coat. "Mister, do you have any books?" The question was so unexpected that Marcus actually smiled, a quick rusty thing that transformed his scarred face for just a moment. "Might be some in the study. Haven't looked in there for a while." "Can I see?" Marcus glanced at Clara, who nodded slightly. "Come on, then." The study was a tomb of another life. Dust covers here too, but underneath walls of books reaching to the ceiling. Marcus pulled back one of the sheets, revealing leather-bound volumes with gold lettering on their spines. "My wife loved to read," he said, running a finger along the spines. "Spent half our money on books, much to my brother's horror. Said she wanted our daughter to grow up knowing there was more to the world than cattle and cowboys." "What was her name?" Samuel asked. "Your daughter." "Elizabeth, but we called her Libby." "That's pretty. My papa called me Sam the Man. Said I was going to be strong like him someday." The boy's voice got quiet. "I don't feel very strong." Marcus crouched down to Samuel's level. "Being strong isn't about feeling it. It's about getting up every morning even when you don't want to. It's about taking care of your family even when you're scared. From what I've seen, you've been plenty strong." Samuel leaned against Marcus's knee, a tentative gesture of trust. "Will you teach me to be stronger?" "If your mother allows it." They returned to the kitchen to find Clara had worked some kind of miracle with the meager supplies. The beans were soaking, but she'd made a rough biscuit from the flour and lard and fried up some of the preserved meat with wild onions she'd found somewhere. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Marcus asked, watching her move around the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd made do with less for too long. "Necessity," she said simply. "When you have children, you learn to make something from nothing." They ate in relative silence, the only sounds the scrape of spoons against plates and the pop of wood in the stove. Rose and Samuel devoured their food with the single-minded focus of the truly hungry. Clara ate more slowly, but Marcus noticed she didn't take seconds until both children had eaten their fill. After supper as promised, Clara opened the jar of peaches. The children's faces lit up at the sweetness, and for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened seemed to lift. Rose even smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she said to Marcus, shy but sincere. "You're welcome." Later, after Clara had tucked the children into the beds upstairs, sheets dusty but warm enough with the quilts Marcus had found, she came back down to find him sitting by the main fireplace, a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses on the table beside him. "I don't drink," she said. "Neither did I before." He poured himself 2 fingers worth. "Before seems like another lifetime now." Clara sat in the chair across from him, pulling a worn shawl around her shoulders. "You said tomorrow we'd discuss terms." "I did. But you have thoughts now." Marcus took a sip of whiskey, let it burn down his throat. "Here's what I know. That paper I showed the sheriff will only hold up so long. Mail-order bride contracts need to be consummated, legally married, within 30 days of the bride's arrival, or they're void. You want me to actually marry you. I want you to have a choice." He met her eyes. "You marry me. You and the children get protection. Legal protection. No one can touch you without going through me. And despite how I might look, I've got some standing in this territory. Ranch isn't much, but it's paid for. You'd have a home. And if I don't, then in 30 days you take whatever supplies you need and leave. I won't stop you. But Sheriff Raleigh will still be looking for you. And whoever wanted you dead badly enough to frame you for your husband's murder won't have given up." Clara stared into the fire. You said you knew what it was like to be condemned for something that wasn't your fault. What did you mean? Marcus poured another finger of whiskey, but didn't drink it. Just held the glass, watching the amber liquid catch the firelight. 3 years ago, I was tracking a gang of cattle thieves. The Henderson boys, mean as snakes and twice as stupid. I'd been gone 2 weeks following their trail into the mountains. While I was gone, they doubled back. Came here. His voice went flat, emotionless. Set the house on fire with my wife and daughter inside. Barred the doors from the outside so they couldn't get out. Clara's hand went to her throat. I found them the next day. What was left? He took a drink, then a longer one. Town blamed me. Said if I hadn't gone after the gang, hadn't made it personal, they never would have come here. Said I might as well have lit the match myself. That's not fair. Fair doesn't matter much out here. What matters is what people believe. And they believe I'm bad luck. Death follows me, they say. They're not entirely wrong. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Clara spoke. My husband wasn't a good man, but he wasn't a bad one either. He was just weak. He owed money to the wrong people. When he couldn't pay, they came to collect. Only he didn't have anything left to give, except... She trailed off. Except you. She nodded. He refused, so they killed him. Made it look like I did it. A wife finally fed up with her worthless husband. The sheriff was paid to make sure I hanged for it, but I ran instead. Took the children and ran. Who wanted you dead? Clara's jaw tightened. My father. Marcus looked up sharply. Your father ordered your husband killed. No, my father ordered me brought back to Boston. Alive or dead, he wasn't particular about which. You see, Mr. Kane, Marcus, I'm not just some farmer's widow. My maiden name is Clara Whitmore Patterson. My father is Judge Ezekiel Patterson of Boston, one of the richest men in Massachusetts. Marcus set down his glass. You're telling me? I'm telling you that you didn't just save some random woman from hanging. You put yourself between me and one of the most powerful men on the eastern seaboard, a man who spent the last 10 years trying to force me back under his control. She stood, wrapping the shawl tighter. So before you offer me marriage, even a false one, you should know what you're really signing up for. Marcus stood, too moving, to the fireplace. He picked up an iron poker and adjusted the log, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. My brother used to say that every person deserves a second chance at life, a clean slate. He was naive about most things, but maybe he was right about that. He turned to face her. I'm not afraid of your father, Clara. I've got nothing left to lose that matters. You have this ranch. Dirt and wood. It only matters if there's life in it. This place has been a tomb for 3 years. Your children's laughter today. That's the first real sound these walls have heard since. He stopped jaw-working. Clara moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she must have hidden somewhere in her threadbare belongings. Close enough to see the exhaustion she'd been hiding behind rigid posture and careful words. If I agree to this marriage, she said slowly, I need to know what you expect from me. I expect you to help run this ranch. Cook clean the usual things that need doing. I expect you to let me teach your boy how to ride and shoot because he'll need those skills out here. I expect you to maintain the lie in town that we're married, that you're here by choice. And in private, Marcus met her eyes steadily. In private, you're free to be whoever you need to be. Your bedroom is your own. I won't cross that threshold unless invited, and I'm not expecting an invitation. You'd be satisfied with a marriage in name only. I'd be satisfied knowing those children upstairs get to grow up, that they get a chance my Libby didn't have. His voice roughened. I'd be satisfied with purpose again. Clara studied him for a long moment, this scarred man offering her salvation with no strings attached. She'd learned not to trust easily. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but there was something in Marcus Kane's eyes that spoke to her. Not kindness exactly, but understanding, the recognition of one survivor by another. "I need 3 days," she said finally. 3 days to decide. "Fair enough." She turned to go upstairs, then paused. "That first night, when we stayed in the cave before coming here, you gave us your blanket, slept in the cold yourself. You noticed that? A man who gives his blanket to strangers' children isn't the harbinger of death this town thinks you are." Marcus's smile was bitter. "Tell that to my wife and daughter." Clara crossed back to him, and before she could think better of it, placed her hand on his arm. "Their death wasn't your fault. You were trying to protect the town, trying to do what was right. Right and wrong don't matter much to the dead." "No," she agreed, "but they matter to the living. And we're still living, Marcus. Despite everything, we're still here." She left him then standing by the dying fire, but her words lingered in the room like smoke seeping into the walls that had heard too much silence for too long. Upstairs, Clara checked on the children one more time. They were sleeping peacefully, Samuel's hand clutching a book Marcus had let him borrow. Rose curled up with her arm protective over her younger brother, even in sleep. She stood in the doorway, watching them breathe, these two small souls who depended on her entirely. Every choice she'd made for the past year had been for them. Every humiliation endured, every mile run, every lie told. Now she had a choice to make that would determine their future. Marriage to a stranger, a man carved from loss and scar tissue, who offered safety, but no promises of happiness. Or the road again, always looking over their shoulders, always running from shadows that might be real or might be memory. Clara moved to the window, looking out at the ranch spread below. The moon had risen, casting everything in silver light. She could see Marcus down by the barn, checking on the horses one last time before bed. He moved with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste motion, not to waste anything. She thought about what he'd said about his brother, about second chances and clean slates. Maybe that's what this was. Not a love story or a fairy tale, but simply two broken people agreeing to build something from the wreckage. A practical arrangement born of necessity. But as she watched Marcus close the barn door and head back to the house, she wondered if practical arrangements could grow into something more. If trust could bloom in soil watered by shared grief. If a marriage built on mutual need could eventually shelter something closer to happiness. 3 days she'd asked for. 3 days to decide the rest of their lives. But standing there in what used to be his daughter's room, watching this man who'd saved her without asking for anything in return, Clara suspected her decision was already made. The nightmare came for Clara on the second night, as it always did when she finally felt safe enough to sleep deeply. She was back in that house in Missouri, watching James argue with the men who'd come to collect. She could smell the tobacco on their breath. See the gun oil gleaming on their weapons. Hear the exact moment James's voice cracked from bravado to fear. "Please, I just need more time." The gunshot was louder in her dreams than it had been in reality, or maybe memory amplified what trauma needed to process. James fell backward, blood spreading across his white shirt like spilled wine. The men turned to her then, and the leader, a man with pale eyes and a Boston accent she recognized too well, smiled. "Your father sends his regards, Miss Patterson." Clara woke, gasping, sheets soaked with sweat despite the cold. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then she heard it, singing low and rough, coming from somewhere outside. She wrapped the shawl around her shoulders and moved to the window. Marcus was in the small cemetery plot beyond the barn, kneeling beside two headstones. His voice carried on the still night air, singing what sounded like a lullaby. Clara couldn't make out all the words, but she caught fragments. "Sleep now, my darling. Daddy's here, watching over." She turned away, feeling like an intruder on his grief. But the image stayed with her. This hard man brought to his knees by memory, singing to graves that couldn't hear him. The next morning, Clara found Marcus already at work, mending fence posts along the eastern pasture. The children were still asleep, worn out from yesterday's exploration of the ranch. She brought him coffee, strong and black, the way she'd seen him take it. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, not looking up from his work. "Old habits." He paused, hammer suspended mid-swing. "The dreams get easier, never stop completely, but they get easier." "How long did it take for you?" Marcus drove the nail home with unnecessary force. "I'll let you know when it happens." They worked in silence for a while, Clara holding posts steady while he secured them. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning frost. Finally, she asked the question that had been haunting her. "Tell me about them, your wife and daughter." Marcus straightened, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down the hammer and leaned against the fence. "Margaret was everything I wasn't. Educated, refined. She could read Latin and speak French. Had no business marrying a rough cowboy who could barely write his own name." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "But she said I made her laugh. Said that was worth more than all the education in the world." "How did you meet?" "Her father hired me to guide their wagon train from Independence to Sacramento. 6 months on the trail. She read to me every night by the campfire. Shakespeare, Byron, even some newfangled writer named Dickens. By the time we reached California, I knew I'd follow her anywhere." Clara watched his face soften with memory. And she felt the same. "Took some convincing. Her father near had a heart attack when I asked for her hand, but Margaret was stubborn when she wanted something. We married in Sacramento, then came out here to build something of our own." "Your daughter, Libby, came along 2 years later. Perfect little thing. Had her mother's eyes and my stubbornness." His voice caught. "She was 5 when it happened. Just learning to read. Margaret was teaching her, same as she'd taught me." Clara reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his on the fence post. "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you," Marcus said suddenly. "Margaret, she always said the women who survived out here were the ones who bent but didn't break, like prairie grass in a storm. I feel pretty broken most days." "Broken things can still be useful. Sometimes they're stronger for having been mended." They were interrupted by Rose calling from the house. "Mama Sam won't wake up. He's burning up." Clara ran Marcus close behind. They found Samuel in bed, face flushed with fever, breathing shallow and rapid. Clara pressed her hand to his forehead and swore under her breath. "How long has he been sick?" Marcus asked. "He was fine last night. Maybe caught cold from those nights in the cave." Clara's voice was tight with fear. Marcus was already moving. "I'll ride for the doctor." "No." Clara grabbed his arm. "The doctor in town won't come. Not for me." "Then I'll make him." "Marcus." Her grip tightened. "Please, I know what this is. He's had it before. Fever comes on fast breaks in a day or two if we can keep it controlled. I need willowbark feverfew if you can find it, and ice from the creek." He studied her face, saw the desperate competence there. "You've dealt with this before." "More times than I can count. Please, trust me." Marcus nodded, once then was gone. Clara turned to Rose, who stood frozen in the doorway. "Sweetheart, I need you to get me all the clean cloths you can find, and the washing basin." For the next 6 hours, Clara didn't leave Samuel's side. She bathed his face and neck with cold cloths, spooned water between his cracked lips, sang the same lullabies her own mother had sung before respectability and reputation became more important than love. Marcus returned with the herbs and a block of ice chipped from the frozen creek. He also brought something else, a small journal, leather-bound and worn. "This was Margaret's," he said, handing it to Clara. "She wrote down remedies, treatments, things she learned from the Cheyenne women who used to trade at the fort. Might be something useful." Clara opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant and precise. Notes about treating croup-setting bones, birthing babies. A healer's handbook written by a woman who'd understood that knowledge was survival out here. "She was remarkable," Clara said softly. "She was." Marcus sat on the floor beside the bed, watching Clara work. "Like you." As the day wore on, Samuel's fever climbed. He thrashed in his sleep, calling for his father, for Clara, for water that couldn't quench the fire burning inside him. Rose curled up beside Marcus, seeking comfort. He wasn't sure he knew how to give any more. "Is he going to die?" she asked in a small voice. Marcus remembered another small voice asking a different question. "Is Mama coming back?" He'd lied, then told Libby, yes, everything would be fine. The lie had died with her. "Your mother's doing everything she can," he said instead. "She's strong, and so is your brother. Papa said Sam was weak, said he'd never amount to anything soft as he was." Marcus looked down at the girl. "Your papa was wrong. Soft doesn't mean weak. Sometimes the softest things are the strongest. Water's soft, but it can carve through stone given enough time." Rose considered this. "Mama's not soft." "No. She pretends to be sometimes, when people are watching. But I've seen her break a man's nose when he tried to hurt Sam." This was news to Marcus. He filed it away with all the other pieces of Clara Whitmore he was collecting, trying to build a complete picture of this woman who'd crashed into his life. Night fell. Samuel's fever finally broke around midnight, his breathing evening out into natural sleep. Clara sagged with relief, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Marcus caught her before she could fall. "You need to rest," he said. "I need to watch him." "I'll watch. Sleep, Clara." She was too tired to argue, but instead of going to her own bed, she curled up beside Samuel, one hand on his chest, to feel his breathing. Marcus covered her with a quilt, then settled back in his chair to keep vigil. Rose had fallen asleep hours ago. In the lamplight, Marcus could see the family resemblance. All three had the same determined chin, the same way of frowning in their sleep. He thought about families, about how they were made. Blood was one way, but maybe not the only way. Around 3 a.m, Clara stirred. Her eyes found his in the dim light. "You're still here," she said, surprised. "Said I'd watch." She sat up slowly, checking Samuel's forehead. "Cool now, the crisis passed." "Why are you doing this? Really?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You know what the worst part is about losing them?" Clara waited. "It's not the pain. Pain fades eventually. It's the silence. This house used to be so loud. Margaret singing while she cooked. Libby running through the halls, always laughing about something. Even when they were quiet, there was presence, life. After they died, the silence was so complete, I thought it might drive me mad." He stood moved to the window. "Then you showed up with these children, and suddenly there was noise again. Footsteps, voices, even crying. It's all better than the silence. So we're just noise to fill your empty house." Marcus turned to her. "No, you're a chance." "At what?" "I don't know yet, but for the first time in 3 years, I want to find out." Clara rose, moving to stand beside him at the window. Dawn was still hours away, but the stars were brilliant in the clear sky. "I know who you are," she said suddenly. "Or who you were. Marcus Kane, the lawbringer, the man who cleaned up Deadwood almost single-handed, who tracked the Colton gang through 3 territories. Marcus's shoulders tensed. "That was a long time ago." "Not so long. My husband used to tell stories about you. Said you were the one honest man in a territory full of thieves." "Your husband was wrong. I was just better at violence than most." "Is that why you stopped after your family?" "I stopped because violence follows violent men home. My reputation got them killed, sure as if I'd pulled the trigger myself." Clara turned to face him fully. "You're wrong. Am I? Evil men killed your family. Not you, not your reputation. Evil men who would have hurt others if you hadn't stopped them. How many families did you save by taking those men down? How many children got to grow up because you removed the monsters from their world?" Marcus laughed, bitter and short. "You trying to absolve me. I'm trying to understand you. Because in 2 days I have to decide whether to bind my children's lives to yours." "And what have you decided?" Clara looked back at Samuel, sleeping peacefully now. "Ask me tomorrow." The next day brought unexpected visitors. Clara was in the kitchen teaching Rose to make biscuits when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Marcus appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand. "Stay inside," he said quietly. "Keep the children away from the windows." But Clara recognized one of the voices calling from the yard. Her blood went cold. "I know you're in there, Clara. Your father's patience has run out." It was Harrison Wells, her father's chief enforcer, the man with pale eyes from her nightmares, the one who'd pulled the trigger on James. Marcus stepped onto the porch, rifle casual but ready. "This is private property, gentlemen. State your business or move along." "Our business is with the woman inside, Clara Patterson. We know she's here. Only woman here is my wife, Clara Kane, and she's not receiving visitors." Clara watched through a crack in the door as Harrison dismounted, hands held away from his weapons in a mockery of peace. "Mr. Kane, you seem like a reasonable man. You should know that woman is wanted for murder in Missouri. There's a substantial reward for her return to Boston, alive preferably, but that's negotiable. Like I said, the only woman here is my wife. And last I checked, Wyoming territory doesn't recognize Missouri warrants without proper documentation. You have any?" Harrison's smile was all teeth. "We both know she's not really your wife, Kane. The marriage was never consummated, never officially registered. It's a piece of paper and nothing more. You seem awfully well informed about my personal business. Judge Patterson is thorough. He knows about the fake contract, knows you're harboring a fugitive. But he's willing to be reasonable. Give us the woman, and he'll make it worth your while. $20,000. Cash." Marcus whistled low. "That's a lot of money for one woman. She's very special to the judge." "Special enough to have her husband murdered?" Harrison's expression didn't change. "I wouldn't know anything about that." Clara couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed past Marcus onto the porch head high, despite her racing heart. "Hello, Harrison." "Miss Patterson, your father misses you." "My father doesn't miss anything. He acquires and controls. I'm simply property that slipped his grasp." "You're his daughter." "I stopped being his daughter the day he sold me to James Whitmore to settle a business debt. I was 17 years old." Marcus's hand tightened on his rifle. Harrison sighed theatrically. "This is all very touching, but we're on a schedule. You can come quietly, or we can do this the hard way. Either way, you're coming with us." "No," Marcus said simply. "She's not. There are 6 of us, Kane. You really want to die for some woman you barely know." Marcus smiled, then the kind of smile that made smart men reconsider their choices. "I've been dead for 3 years, Wells. Just been waiting for my body to catch up. But if you want to help that along, you're welcome to try." The tension stretched taut as wire. Then a small voice cut through it. "Mama." Samuel stood in the doorway, still pale from his fever. Rose appeared beside him, clutching his hand. Harrison's eyes lit up with cruel interest. "Ah, the children. Judge Patterson didn't mention children. I'm sure he'll be delighted to meet his grandchildren." "They're not his," Clara said quickly. "They're James's children, not—" Now, Clara. We both know that's not true. The boy, maybe. But the girl, she has the Patterson eyes." Clara went white. Marcus stepped between her and Harrison. "You need to leave. Now. Or what you'll shoot us all in front of the children." Harrison shook his head. "You're not that man anymore, Kane. Everyone knows you went soft after your family died. You don't have the stomach for killing these days." Marcus handed his rifle to Clara. Then he stepped off the porch, walked straight up to Harrison, and broke his nose with a single precise blow. Harrison went down hard, blood streaming between his fingers. "You're right," Marcus said calmly. "I don't kill anymore, but I'm still plenty capable of hurting you. All of you, in ways that will make you wish I'd just shot you." He looked at the other 5 men. "Your boss has 30 seconds to get on his horse. Anyone still here after that, I start breaking bones, starting with fingers. You ever tried to shoot with broken fingers?" 2 of the men were already backing toward their horses. Harrison struggled to his feet, fury and blood painting his face red. "This isn't over," he spat. "Judge Patterson always gets what he wants." "Not this time," Clara said from the porch. "Tell my father I'm dead. Tell him you found my grave. Tell him whatever you want. But know this, if you come near my children again, I'll kill you myself." Harrison laughed through the blood. You couldn't even protect your husband." "My husband was weak. Marcus Kane is not." She raised the rifle sighting down the barrel with surprising expertise. "And neither am I. Not anymore." Something in her voice, in her steady hands and steadier gaze, made Harrison step back. He mounted his horse, gave them one last look full of promise and threat, then rode away with his men. Marcus waited until they were out of sight before turning back to Clara. She was trembling now, rifle drooping in her hands. The children ran to her, and she dropped to her knees to hold them. "Pack your things," Marcus said quietly. "We're getting married today." Clara looked up at him surprised. "What?" "They'll be back. Soon. With more men, or legal papers, or both. But if we're legally married, properly married, registered, and witnessed, it makes everything harder for them. Wyoming law protects wives from being extradited without their husband's consent. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we have now. You do that. After what you just learned about Rose, about my father." Marcus crouched down beside them, meeting Rose's frightened eyes. "Your grandfather sounds like a bastard, but you're not him. None of you are responsible for who your blood comes from. You're only responsible for who you choose to be." Rose threw her arms around his neck, surprising everyone, including Marcus. He froze for a moment, then carefully, as if he might break her, hugged her back. "Can I call you Papa?" she whispered. Marcus's eyes found Clara's over the girl's shoulder. Clara was crying silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her face. "If your mother agrees," he said roughly. Clara nodded, unable to speak. That afternoon, they rode to the small chapel 10 miles north, where a traveling preacher was passing through. The ceremony was simple. A few words, a plain iron ring Marcus had bought from the blacksmith, and promises made before God and the preacher's wife as witness. But when Marcus kissed Clara, a brief chaste touch of lips that sealed their union, he felt something crack open inside his chest. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. As they rode home, Clara sitting in front of him on the horse with the children on the wagon behind, she leaned back against his chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For giving us a chance at a real life. For being the father my children deserve." Marcus's arm tightened around her waist. "We're giving each other a chance, Clara. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Two people agreeing to face whatever comes together instead of alone." She turned to look at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. Really smiled, not the careful, guarded thing she'd shown before. "Yes," she said. "I think that's exactly what it is." As they crested the hill overlooking the ranch, the setting sun painted everything gold. The house that had been a tomb for 3 years suddenly looked like what it could be. A home. A place where broken people could heal, where children could grow up safe, where the past might finally release its grip. It wouldn't be easy. Harrison Wells would be back in some form or another. Judge Patterson wouldn't give up easily. And the ghosts that haunted both Clara and Marcus wouldn't disappear just because they'd spoken vows. But for now, for this moment, they were a family riding home together, and that was enough. That night, Clara knocked on Marcus's bedroom door. He opened it surprised. She stood there in her nightgown, hair loose around her shoulders, looking vulnerable and determined in equal measure. "I don't want a marriage in name only," she said quietly. "If we're going to do this, really do this, then I want to try. All of it." Marcus studied her face. "You don't owe me anything, Clara, not that." "I know. This isn't about owing. It's about choosing. I choose you, Marcus Kane. Question is, do you choose me?" Instead of answering with words, Marcus stepped aside, letting her into his room, into his life, into whatever future they could build from the ashes of their pasts. The door closed softly behind them, and the house settled into peaceful silence. But this time it wasn't the oppressive silence of grief. It was the quiet of a family safe under one roof, of children sleeping soundly, of two wounded souls finally finding shelter in each other. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the ranch in a blanket of white. By morning, everything would look new, clean, full of possibility. A second chance, Marcus's brother would have called it a beginning. The snow had been falling for 3 days straight when fate finally showed its hand. Marcus had taken Samuel out to check the cattle, teaching him how to read weather signs in the clouds when they spotted the overturned wagon half buried in a drift near Widow's Creek. "Stay behind me," Marcus told the boy, drawing his pistol as they approached. But there was no ambush waiting, just carnage. 2 bodies frozen solid, a man and woman well-dressed even in death. City folks who'd had no business traveling these roads in winter. "Mr. Marcus," Samuel's voice was small, scared. "There's something moving." From beneath the wagon came a sound, weak, barely there. Marcus dropped to his knees, digging through the snow with his bare hands until he found her. A young woman, maybe 20 lips blue with cold, but still breathing. She was clutching something to her chest, a leather satchel sealed with wax. "Sam, ride back fast as you can. Tell your mother to get the fire hot and water boiling. Go." The boy took off like his life depended on it. Marcus wrapped the woman in his coat and lifted her onto his horse. She was light as a bird bone, sharp through her dress. As he rode, she stirred eyes fluttering open, green eyes like Clara's but darker, full of secrets. "The papers," she whispered. "Don't let them. Find the papers. Save your strength. Promise me." Her frozen fingers gripped his shirt. "Promise you'll protect them." "I promise." She went limp then, but her breath still fogged in the cold air. Marcus rode harder. Clara took charge the moment he carried the woman inside. She stripped her wet clothes with clinical efficiency, wrapped her in warm blankets, spooned hot broth between her cracked lips. Rose helped heating stones in the fire to tuck around the woman's body. "Who is she?" Clara asked. "Don't know. Found her beneath an overturned wagon. Parents may be dead at the scene." Clara's hands stilled for a moment. "Another orphan of the frontier. They were collecting them like strays, it seemed." The woman didn't wake for 2 days. When she finally did, her first word was papers. Marcus brought her the satchel still sealed. She clutched it like a lifeline. "My name is Catherine Holloway," she said, voice hoarse. "I need to speak with you. Alone." Clara started to protest, but Marcus touched her shoulder gently. "Give us a moment." When they were alone, Catherine struggled to sit up. "You're Marcus Kane, the lawbringer. Former. I know who you are. More importantly, I know who your wife is. Or was." She opened the satchel with shaking hands, pulling out a sheaf of documents. "Clara Patterson, daughter of Judge Ezekiel Patterson of Boston." Marcus's hand moved to his gun. "If you're working for him, I'm running from him. Same as her." Catherine spread the papers on the bed. "My father was Judge Patterson's personal attorney. Was until he grew a conscience. These documents prove everything. The murders Patterson ordered, the officials he's bribed, the young women he sold to settle debts, including his own daughter." Marcus picked up one of the papers. It was a contract signed and witnessed. The sale of Clara Patterson to James Whitmore for the sum of $50,000. Payment for a gambling debt. Jesus Christ. There's more. Patterson didn't just have James Whitmore killed. He's been killing everyone who knows the truth about his business dealings. My parents were taking these documents to the federal prosecutor in Denver. Patterson's men caught up with us. "Why should I believe you?" Catherine laughed, bitter and broken. "Because in about 2 days, maybe 3 Harrison Wells is going to show up here with a small army. And this time, he won't be interested in taking Clara alive." "How do you know that?" "Because I was there when Patterson gave the order." "Burn it all," he said. "The woman, the children, anyone who stands with them. He's done playing games." Marcus stood pacing to the window. Outside, the snow continued to fall, peaceful and quiet. A storm was coming, but not the kind made of wind and ice. "What do you want?" he asked. "Safe passage to Denver, and your protection until I can get these documents to someone who can use them." "That's a big ask. I'm offering you something bigger in return. Proof that Clara's innocent. Proof that can destroy Judge Patterson. Freedom for your family." Marcus turned to study her. She was young, scared, but there was steel in her spine. Reminded him of Clara when he'd first seen her on that platform. "I need to discuss this with my wife." "Don't take too long. Wells is maybe 48 hours behind me. Less if the snow lets up." Marcus found Clara in the kitchen teaching Rose how to mend a torn dress. The domestic scene was so normal, so peaceful, it made his chest ache. He hated that he was about to shatter it. "We need to talk," he said. "Alone." Clara read his face, sent Rose to check on Samuel, then followed him to the study. He told her everything, Catherine's identity, the documents, the coming attack. Clara listened in silence, her face growing paler with each word. "He's really going to kill them," she said finally. "My own father is going to murder his grandchildren. We won't let that happen." "How? How do we stop him? He has money men influence." "We have something better. We have proof of his crimes. And we have friends." Clara laughed short and bitter. "What friends? This town hates you. They barely tolerate me. Maybe it's time to change that." That evening, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He rode into town, not to buy supplies or conduct business, but to ask for help. He stopped first at the church where Reverend Thompson was preparing his Sunday sermon. "Reverend?" The older man looked up surprised. "Mr. Kane, it's been a long time." "Too long. I need your help." Marcus laid it all out. The threat, the proof, the woman upstairs who could bring down one of the most corrupt men in the country. Thompson listened, fingers steepled, face grave. "You're asking me to risk my congregation for a woman most of them consider a criminal. I'm asking you to do what's right, to protect innocent children from a man who would murder them for revenge. And if I refuse," Marcus stood to leave, "then you're not the man of God I thought you were." "Wait." Thompson rose, moved to the window. "Margaret used to come here, you know, every Sunday. She'd sit in the third pew with little Elizabeth singing hymns loud enough to wake the dead. She had the most beautiful voice. I remember. After they died, this town failed you. We let grief and gossip turn you into something you weren't, a scapegoat for our own failures." He turned back to Marcus. "Maybe it's time we made that right." The next stop was harder. The saloon was full of men who'd once respected Marcus, who'd turned their backs when he'd needed them most. He pushed through the doors, conversations dying as he entered. "Well, well." Sheriff Rowley stood from his card game. "Marcus Kane gracing us with his presence." "I'm not here for you, Raleigh," Marcus addressed the room. "I'm here because in 2 days, maybe less hired killers are coming to burn my ranch and murder my family, including 2 children whose only crime is being born to the wrong grandfather." "Not our problem," someone called out. "No. What happens when they're done with us? You think men like that just leave? They'll drink your whiskey, take your women, burn whatever they want. You've all seen it before. Towns destroyed by violent men who think they're above the law." Old Pete the blacksmith stood up. "You brought this trouble here, Kane." "No. I married a woman who needed help, same as any of you would have done. Or have you all forgotten what it means to be men, to protect those who can't protect themselves?" Pretty words from a killer, Rayleigh sneered. Marcus moved so fast the sheriff didn't have time to react. He grabbed Raleigh by the throat, slammed him against the bar. "Yes, I've killed. Men who needed killing. Men who burned families, raped women, slaughtered innocents. I've done the bloody work so you could sleep safe. And when my family paid the price for that work, you all turned away." He released Raleigh, who gasped for air. "But those children in my house don't deserve your cowardice. You want to hate me. Fine. But are you really going to let children die because of it?" Silence stretched through the saloon. Then a voice from the back. Doc Brennan, who'd been too drunk to help when Marcus had needed him most. What do you need? Men with guns, courage, and someone to take a woman to Denver with proof that could bring down half the corrupt judges in the country. That's a tall order. Yes, it is. Marcus looked around the room. But I'm betting there's still some men in this town who remember what it means to stand for something. One by one, they started to stand. Not all of them. Raleigh and his cronies stayed seated, but enough. Pete the blacksmith, Doc Brennan, Tom Morrison from the general store, even young Billy Watson, barely 18, but eager to prove himself. When? Pete asked. They'll hit at dawn, most likely. Day after tomorrow, if the snow holds. We'll be there. As Marcus turned to leave, Raleigh called out, You're going to get them all killed, Kane, just like you got your family killed. Marcus paused at the door. Maybe, but at least they'll die standing for something. What will you die for, Raleigh? Another hand of cards, another bottle, another payment from Judge Patterson. Raleigh went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just remember, when the shooting starts, everyone shows their true colors. Make sure you can live with yours. He left them there, riding home through the falling snow. But he wasn't alone. Tom Morrison caught up with him halfway. That was a hell of a speech, Tom said. Meant every word. I know. That's why I'm here. My Mary, she's been teaching your Clara's girl to read. Says she's smart as a whip. Be ashamed to lose that light. Yes, it would. They rode in companionable silence for a while. Then Tom said, You know Raleigh's dirty right has been taking Patterson's money for months. I figured. You got a plan for that? Marcus smiled cold and sharp. I do. Back at the ranch, Clara was waiting on the porch despite the cold. She ran to him as he dismounted, threw her arms around his neck. I thought you'd left. Thought you'd decided we were too much trouble. Never. He held her tight. You're my family now. All of you. And I protect what's mine. She pulled back to look at him. How many agreed to help? Enough. Marcus, trust me, Clara. I've fought worse odds and won. That night, they prepared. Catherine, still weak, but determined, helped Clara hide the children in the root cellar Marcus had reinforced years ago. It had a hidden exit that led to the barn. Margaret's idea, always planning for the worst. If things go bad, Marcus told Clara, you take them and run. There's a horse saddled and ready. Ride for Denver. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. You will if it means saving them. Clara gripped his shirt. We stand together or not at all. That's what marriage means. Before he could argue, Rose appeared in the doorway. I want to help. Absolutely not, Clara said. I can shoot. Marcus taught me. I'm good. It was true. The girl was a natural steady hands and steadier nerves, but she was still just 8 years old. Your job is to protect your brother, Marcus said. That's the most important job of all. Rose nodded solemnly. I won't let anyone hurt him. I know you won't. Later, as the house settled into uneasy sleep, Marcus found Clara in their bedroom loading a rifle with practiced efficiency. He watched her for a moment, this woman who'd gone from condemned criminal to his wife in a matter of days, who'd brought life back to his dead home, who'd given him purpose again. You should have married a banker, he said. Nice, safe, boring. Clara looked up, smiled. I married the man who saw me on that platform and thought I was worth saving. That's worth more than safe. Am I worth it? She set down the rifle crossed to him. You gave my children a father. You gave me a name that means something. You gave us hope when we had none. So yes, Marcus Kane, you're worth it. You're worth everything. She kissed him then, not the brief touch of their wedding, but something deeper, hungrier, a claiming, a promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens tomorrow, we survive, Clara interrupted. We survive and we build that life we talked about. The one where Rose becomes a teacher and Samuel raises horses and we grow old together on this land. That's a nice dream. It's not a dream, it's a plan. And I'm very good at making plans work. Outside, the snow had stopped. The moon emerged from behind clouds, casting everything in silver light. It was beautiful, peaceful, the calm before the storm. Marcus stood at the window, watching. Somewhere out there, Harrison Wells was coming with his hired killers, coming to destroy everything Marcus had found with Clara. But this time was different. This time, Marcus wasn't alone. He had a family to protect, a town that had finally remembered its courage, and a woman who'd taught him that broken things could be mended. "You're thinking too loud," Clara said from the bed. "Just planning. Come to bed. Whatever tomorrow brings, we face it rested." Marcus took one last look at the peaceful night, then joined his wife. She curled against him, warm and solid and real, not a dream or a ghost or a memory, but a living, breathing reason to fight. "Tell me about Boston," he said. "About your life before." "Why?" "Because I want to know everything, every piece of you." So she told him. About the grand house on Beacon Hill. About piano lessons and French tutors and balls where she danced with men who saw her as currency. About the first time she defied her father, refusing to marry a senator's son who had cruel hands and crueler appetites. About the beating that followed. About James, who'd seemed kind at first, who'd promised to take her away from all of it. "I was so naive," she said. "I thought love could conquer anything. Maybe it can. Just not the fairy tale kind. The real kind, the kind that fights and bleeds and refuses to give up." "Is that what this is, love?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I think it might be. Or the beginning of it." Clara pressed closer. "I think so too." They didn't sleep much that night. Instead, they talked, sharing stories and scars, building a foundation for whatever came next. And when dawn finally approached, bringing with it the sound of horses in the distance, they were ready. Marcus kissed Clara one last time. "Remember what I said. If things go bad, we stand together," she said firmly. "Now go. Show them what happens when they threaten our family." Marcus strapped on his guns, the weight familiar and strange after 3 years. The lawbringer was dead. But Marcus Kane, husband, father, protector, was very much alive, and he had work to do. The riders appeared on the horizon just as the sun broke through the clouds. More than expected, maybe 20 men. Harrison Wells rode at their head, his broken nose still bandaged, hate burning in his pale eyes. But Marcus wasn't alone. Pete and Tom were already in position. Doc Brennan waited in the barn with Billy Watson, and coming up the road from town, a surprise. Reverend Thompson leading another dozen men, all armed already. Wells pulled up short, clearly not expecting resistance. "This doesn't concern you," he called out to the townsmen. "We're here for the woman and the documents. Stand aside." Thompson moved his horse forward. "I'm afraid we can't do that. You see, Mrs. Kane is a member of my congregation, and we protect our own. She's a murderess. According to whom? A corrupt judge who sold his own daughter. We've seen the proof, Mr. Wells. We know what kind of man Ezekiel Patterson really is." Wells' face twisted. "You have no idea who you're crossing." "Yes," Marcus said, stepping onto the porch. "We do. And we're not afraid." What happened next would be debated in Sheridan for years to come. Some said Wells drew first. Others claimed it was one of his men. But everyone agreed on one thing. When the smoke cleared, Marcus Kane was the last man standing on his porch, blood on his shirt, but not his own, protecting his family like the legend he'd always been. The battle was brief, but vicious. Wells had brought killers, but he'd faced a town that had finally remembered its backbone. And at the center of it all, Marcus Kane, older now, but no less deadly, fighting, not for law or justice, but for something simpler and more powerful: love. When Wells himself finally faced Marcus, both men wounded but still standing, he made one last desperate play. "The children," he gasped. "The girl is Patterson's blood. She deserves to know her heritage, her inheritance. Her heritage is here, Clara said, stepping onto the porch with the rifle steady in her hands. Her inheritance is a father who chose her, a mother who'll die for her, and a home where she's loved for who she is, not what her blood makes her. She pulled the trigger. Wells fell. It was over. The blood on the snow looked like scattered rubies in the morning light. Marcus stood among the bodies, counting the living, grateful for each familiar face still standing. Tom Morrison had taken a bullet in the shoulder, but was laughing as Doc Brennan patched him up. Young Billy Watson sat on the porch steps, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, but proud. He'd stood his ground when grown men might have run. "We need to move fast," Catherine said from the doorway, still pale but dressed for travel. "Judge Patterson will know something's wrong when Wells doesn't report back. We have maybe a week before he sends more men." "Then you leave today," Marcus said. "Pete, can you spare your son to ride escort?" The blacksmith nodded. "Johnny knows these trails better than most. He'll get her to Denver safe." Clara emerged from the house, Rose and Samuel clinging to her skirts. The children had heard the gunfire, felt the house shake with violence, but Clara had kept them safe in the root cellar, singing lullabies to drown out the sound of death. "Is it over?" Rose asked, looking at the bodies being loaded onto a wagon. "This part is," Marcus said, kneeling to her level. "But there's more to come. We need to make some decisions as a family." Reverend Thompson approached, hat in hand. "Mrs. Kane, Mr. Kane, the town owes you an apology. And our thanks. Those documents Miss Holloway shared. We had no idea the extent of Patterson's corruption. You stood with us when it counted," Clara said. "That's all that matters. Still, we'd like to make amends. There's a town meeting tonight. We'd be honored if you'd attend." It was the first invitation Marcus had received to anything in 3 years. He looked at Clara, who nodded slightly. "We'll be there." As the townsfolk departed, taking the bodies of Wells and his men for burial in the unmarked grave reserved for outlaws, Marcus found Sheriff Raley waiting by his horse. The man looked older, defeated. "I suppose you'll be wanting my badge," Raleigh said. "I want answers first. How long have you been taking Patterson's money?" Raley's shoulders sagged. 6 months, maybe 7. Started small. Just information about new arrivals, anyone asking questions. Then he wanted more. Said he'd expose some things I'd done back in Kansas if I didn't cooperate. "You helped frame Clara for murder." "I didn't know that's what I was doing." "Not at first. By the time I figured it out," he shrugged helplessly, "I was in too deep." Marcus studied him. The man was weak, not evil. There was a difference, though. Sometimes the result was the same. "Leave," Marcus said finally. "Today. Don't come back." "That's it. You're letting me go." "You're already gone, Raley. Have been for months." "This is just making it official." Raley mounted his horse, paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you saved her. Both of you deserved better than what this town gave you." After he left, Clara found Marcus in the barn, brushing down his horse with methodical strokes. The animal had served him well in the fight, deserved the attention. "That was merciful," she said. "Letting Raleigh go. Man has to live with his choices. That's punishment enough." Clara moved closer, ran her hand along the horse's neck. "Catherine leaves in an hour. She wanted to thank you again. She's thanking us by taking those documents to Denver. Once they're in federal hands, your father loses his power. But not his rage." Clara's voice was quiet. "He'll never stop coming for me. For us." Marcus set down the brush, turned to face her fully. "Then we need to make it official, legal, beyond question. We're already married. A frontier wedding. Your father will challenge it, say it was performed under duress. We need something more." He took her hands. "Clara, I'm asking you to marry me again, in front of the whole town, with witnesses and documentation that even a Boston judge can't dispute." Clara's eyes searched his face. "That's not the only reason you're asking." "No," he admitted. "It's not." "Then what is?" Marcus struggled for words. He'd never been good at expressing the softer emotions, the ones Margaret had always been able to read in his silences. But Clara deserved words, deserved truth. When I saw you on that platform, I thought I was saving you. But these past days, you saved me. From the silence, from the emptiness, from becoming a ghost in my own life. He squeezed her hands. I'm asking you to marry me because I want to choose this. Choose you. Not because of circumstances or necessity, but because I can't imagine facing tomorrow without you beside me. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Marcus Kane, are you saying you love me? I'm saying I'm learning how to, and I'd like to keep learning for as long as you'll let me. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you again, 100 times if necessary. He kissed her, then there in the barn, with the morning sun streaming through the gaps in the walls, with the smell of hay and horses and gunpowder still lingering. It wasn't romantic in any traditional sense, but it was real. It was theirs. Mama! Samuel's voice broke them apart. The boy stood in the doorway holding something. Miss Catherine wanted you to have this. It was a leather journal, worn and water-stained. Clara opened it carefully. Inside, in a careful hand, were pages and pages of testimonies, women's stories, all victims of Judge Patterson's dealings. My God, Clara breathed. There must be dozens. Catherine appeared behind Samuel. 43. That I could find. Your father has been selling women for years, Clara, using them as currency in his business dealings. You were just the only one who was actually his daughter. These women, where are they now? Dead, mostly. The lucky ones escaped like you. But their stories matter. Their names matter. Catherine pulled on her traveling cloak. That's why I'm not just taking the legal documents to Denver. I'm taking this too. Every newspaper in the country is going to know what kind of man Judge Ezekiel Patterson really is. Clara hugged her, suddenly fierce and desperate. Be careful. He has wretch everywhere. So do we now. The federal prosecutor in Denver is expecting me. He has men waiting to escort me the rest of the way. Catherine pulled back, looked at Marcus. Take care of her. She's the only good thing to come from that family. I will. After Catherine left with Johnny, the blacksmith's son, the ranch felt eerily quiet. The morning's violence might have been a dream, except for the bloodstains on the porch that Clara was scrubbing with lie and determination. Leave it, Marcus said. We'll replace the boards. I don't want the children seeing it. They've already seen worse. Clara's hands stilled. That doesn't mean they should have to keep seeing it. Marcus understood. She was trying to build something clean and new from the wreckage of their lives. He fetched boards from the barn, and together they pulled up the blood-stained planks and replaced them with fresh wood. It was satisfying work, removing the evidence of violence and replacing it with something solid and unmarked. That evening, they attended the town meeting as promised. The church was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. Marcus hadn't seen the town this united since before the war. Reverend Thompson called for order. We're here to discuss two matters. First, the position of sheriff now vacant. Second, the matter of reparations to the Kane family for our collective failure 3 years ago. We don't need reparations, Marcus said, standing. We need neighbors. We need a community that stands together against the kind of evil that came for us today. Then you'll have it, Tom Morrison said. My Mary and I have been talking. What happened to your first family, Marcus? We all bear some responsibility. We let grief and fear turn us into cowards, but today showed us what we can be when we stand together. Old Pete stood up. I propose Marcus Kane for sheriff. The murmur that ran through the church was surprised, but not opposed. Marcus shook his head. I'm done with law work, done with violence. Today suggests otherwise, Doc Brennan said wryly. Today was different. Today was about family. Marcus looked around the room. But if you want law in this town, real law, not the bought kind we've had, Then I propose my wife." The silence was complete. Clara stood slowly, shock evident on her face. "Marcus, what are you—" "You know the law. You've studied it, lived under its worst corruption. You know what justice should look like." He turned to the crowd. "She's smart, she's fair, and she can't be bought. More importantly, she understands what it's like to be powerless under bad law. She'll protect those who need protecting." "A woman sheriff," someone called out. "That's never been done." "Lots of things have never been done until someone does them," Marcus replied. Clara found her voice. "I'm not qualified." "You organized our defense today," Tom Morrison interrupted. "You kept the children safe while coordinating with the fighters. You shot Harrison Wells when Marcus couldn't get a clear shot. Seems pretty qualified to me." "The territorial governor would never approve it," someone argued. Reverend Thompson smiled. "Actually, he might, especially when he receives those documents proving that our previous sheriff was corrupt, along with a petition from the entire town supporting Mrs. Kane's appointment." "This is insane," Clara said. "This is opportunity," Marcus countered. "A chance to build something new, something better." The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous, nothing ever was, but it was decisive. Clara Kane would serve as interim sheriff until the territorial governor could make it official. As they walked home that night, the children running ahead through the snow, Clara kept shaking her head. "Sheriff. They want me to be sheriff. You'll be good at it. I just killed a man this morning. To protect your family. That's the kind of sheriff this town needs. Someone who understands that law and justice aren't always the same thing." Clara stopped walking, turned to face him. "Is this what you want? Your wife wearing a badge, dealing with drunks and thieves, and God knows what else?" Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "I want you to be who you're meant to be. And I think you're meant to be more than just a rancher's wife, hiding from her past. And the children will grow up seeing their mother as someone who stands for something, who fights for what's right. What better lesson could we give them?" Rose ran back to them, cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. "Mama, is it true? Are you going to be sheriff?" "I might be." "That's amazing. Can I be deputy?" "Absolutely not," Clara said, but she was smiling. "When you're older," Marcus added, earning a glare from Clara and a whoop from Rose. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Marcus sat by the fire planning their second wedding. It would be in a week, Reverend Thompson presiding, the whole town invited. A celebration not just of their union, but of new beginnings for everyone. "Your father will hear about this," Clara said. "A female sheriff who killed his chief enforcer, he'll send everything he has. Let him come. We'll be ready." "You can't fight an army, Marcus." "No, but I can fight for you, for our family, for this life we're building." He pulled her closer. "Your father thinks power comes from money and fear, but real power comes from people standing together. Today proved that." Clara leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "When did you become so wise?" "Somewhere between watching you scrub blood off our porch and seeing you stand up in that church." He kissed the top of her head. "You're remarkable, Clara Kane." "Clara Kane," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because in a week you'll be saying it in front of God and everyone. And then we live. We raise those children. We protect this town. We grow old together on this land." He tilted her chin up. "We write a different ending than the one your father planned. Promise, I promise." Outside, snow began to fall, again soft and silent. But inside the house, there was warmth and light, and the sound of two people planning a future neither of them had dared dream of a week ago. The children slept peacefully upstairs, safe and loved. The town that had once turned its back was now standing guard. And somewhere in Denver, Catherine Holloway was delivering documents that would bring down an empire built on corruption and cruelty. Judge Ezekiel Patterson didn't know it yet, but his reign was ending, and from its ashes, something new was rising, something built on love and courage, and the radical idea that broken people could heal each other. The second wedding would be more than a ceremony. It would be a declaration. Clara and Marcus Kane were no longer running from their pasts. They were building a future together. And God help anyone who tried to stop them. The morning after Clara's appointment as interim sheriff, she stood in what had been Rayleigh's office surveying the mess he'd left behind. Empty whiskey bottles lined the windowsill like soldiers who'd lost their war. Papers scattered across the desk, most of them IOUs from Patterson, each one a link in the chain that had bound the former sheriff. "It needs work," Marcus said from the doorway, holding a bucket and rags. "Everything worth having does." They spent the morning cleaning together, Rose and Samuel, helping by organizing the few law books on the shelf. As Clara sorted through the desk drawers, she found something that made her pause, a photograph of Raleigh with a woman and 2 children. "His family," Marcus said, looking over her shoulder. "They died of fever 5 years back. That's when he started drinking." "That's when Patterson got his hooks in him," Clara said softly. "He always did prefer broken people. Easier to control." "Are we broken people?" Clara turned to him. "We were. Now we're something else." "What?" "Mending." That afternoon brought Clara's first test as sheriff. Jake Colby, the town drunk, had started a fight at the saloon and pulled a knife when Tom Morrison tried to intervene. By the time Clara arrived, Jake had Tom cornered blade wavering in his unsteady hand. "Go home, woman," Jake slurred when he saw her. "This ain't your business." "Everything that happens in this town is my business now, Jake." Clara kept her voice calm, steady. "Put the knife down. Or what you'll shoot me like you shot Wells. No, I'll arrest you. You'll spend 3 days sobering up in a cell, and then you'll help Tom repair whatever damage you've caused. Or you can keep waving that knife around and find out what happens when you threaten people I care about." Something in her tone, perhaps the matter-of-fact way she discussed violence, made Jake reconsider. The knife clattered to the floor. "I didn't mean nothing by it," he mumbled. "I know." Clara's voice gentled. "But meaning and doing are different things. Come on, let's get you somewhere you can sleep this off." She didn't drag him to the jail. Instead, she walked him there, one hand on his elbow, like she was escorting an elderly uncle. It was a small thing preserving his dignity, but the men watching from the saloon noticed. This wasn't how Raleigh had done things. That evening, Marcus was teaching Samuel to whittle on the porch when Clara returned home. She looked tired, but satisfied, the badge on her coat catching the last of the sunlight. "How was your first day as the law?" Marcus asked. "Educational. Did you know Mrs. Henderson has been stealing chickens from the Weatherby farm?" "Everyone knows that." "Well, now she's going to pay for them by teaching the Weatherby children to read. Seems fair since she used to be a schoolteacher." Marcus smiled. "Creative justice." "Practical justice. This town doesn't need more people in jail. It needs neighbors helping neighbors." Rose came out carrying a tray with coffee and the cookies she'd made that afternoon, only slightly burned. "Mama, can you teach me to shoot like you did Mr. Wells?" Clara nearly dropped her cup. "Rose, it's a fair question," Marcus said carefully. "She should know how to defend herself. She's 8 years old." "I was 6 when I learned," Samuel piped up, then shrank back at his mother's look. "This is different," Clara said. "This is... I don't want that for you, Rose. I don't want you to know what it feels like to take a life." Rose sat beside her mother, suddenly looking older than her years. "But you did it to protect us. And someday I might need to protect Samuel. Or you. Or..." She glanced shyly at Marcus' papa. The word still caught Marcus off guard sometimes. Papa. Such a simple thing, but it remade him every time one of the children said it. "When you're 12, Clara compromised. And only targets. Never point a gun at anything you don't intend to kill." "Margaret taught Libby to shoot when she was 7, Marcus said quietly. Clara looked at him. And she never had to use it, but knowing she could gave her confidence, made her walk taller in town, especially when I was away. That night, after the children were in bed, Clara found Marcus in the study reading by lamplight. It was one of Margaret's books, poetry, something Marcus never would have chosen on his own. Missing her? Clara asked gently. Remembering her? There's a difference. He set the book aside. For 3 years, all I could see was how she died. Lately, I've been remembering how she lived. Tell me about her. Marcus was quiet for a moment. She laughed at everything, even my terrible jokes. She'd dance in the kitchen while cooking, no music, just humming. She read to me every night, even when I fell asleep in the middle. Said the words would find their way into my dreams. She sounds wonderful. She was. But Clara, he reached for her hand. I'm not wishing for her anymore. I'm not comparing or regretting. What we have, it's different, but it's real. It's ours. Clara climbed into his lap, something she'd never done before. I wasn't sure if you were seeing her when you looked at me. No. Marcus's arms came around her. I see you. The woman who stood on a hanging platform and didn't break, who shoots with deadly accuracy when her children are threatened, who's reinventing what law means in this town. I see Clara Kane, and she takes my breath away. They kiss then deep and searching, and for the first time, Clara didn't hold anything back. When they finally broke apart, she stood and held out her hand. Come to bed, husband. We're not married yet. Not officially. We've been married since the moment you cut that rope from my neck. Everything else is just paperwork. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's scars and sensitive places. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Clara's head on Marcus's chest, listening to his heartbeat. I want more children, she said suddenly. Marcus's hand stilled in her hair. Do you? Not right away. But someday. I want this house full of laughter again, full of life. I'd like that too. Even though it means starting over sleepless nights and dirty diapers and all of it. Especially because it means starting over. He kissed the top of her head. Every child would be proof that we chose hope over fear. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. The second wedding was becoming a town event, with everyone contributing something. Mrs. Morrison was making Clara's dress from cream silk she'd been saving for her daughter's wedding. Pete was fashioning new rings from silver he'd been hoarding. Even Jake Colby, sober now and shame-faced about the knife incident, was building an archway of pine boughs for the ceremony. But not everyone was celebrating. 3 days before the wedding, a stranger rode into town. He was well-dressed, Eastern-looking, with the kind of smooth handsomeness that made Marcus immediately suspicious. He tied his horse outside the sheriff's office and walked in like he owned the place. Clara looked up from her paperwork. Can I help you? Sheriff Kane. Or should I say, Miss Patterson. The man removed his hat, revealing carefully styled dark hair. My name is Theodore Ashley. I'm an attorney from Boston. Clara's hand moved to the gun at her hip. If my father sent you, your father is currently under federal investigation thanks to some very damaging documents that recently surfaced. Ashley smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm here on behalf of your mother. Clara went very still. My mother is dead. No, she's very much alive, though I understand why you'd think otherwise. Your father has been telling that lie for 10 years. He pulled out an envelope sealed with wax. She asked me to give you this. Clara took the envelope with trembling fingers but didn't open it. Why now? Why, after all this time? Because she's finally free. The federal investigation has frozen your father's assets. He can't hurt her anymore, or you. Ashley stood to leave, then paused. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry for not being strong enough to protect you when you were young, for letting him sell you to James Whitmore, for all of it. After he left, Clara sat staring at the envelope for a long time. Marcus found her there an hour later, still frozen. What is it? he asked. Wordlessly, she handed him the envelope. He opened it, read the elegant script inside. My dearest Clara, I know I have no right to contact you after all these years of silence, but I need you to know the truth. I never abandon you. Your father locked me away in an asylum when I tried to stop him from controlling you. I've been there for 10 years, declared insane for the crime of defending my daughter. Theodore Ashley, the man who brought you this letter, helped secure my release when the investigation into your father began. I'm free now, living in Philadelphia with my sister. I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. I just needed you to know that I loved you. I love you still. If you ever find it in your heart to write, I'll be waiting. Your mother, Catherine Patterson. Clara was crying, silently, tears running down her face. Marcus pulled her into his arms. She was alive, Clara whispered. All this time she was alive. What do you want to do? I don't know. I grieved her, buried her in my heart, and now you have a choice. Clara pulled back to look at him. What would you do? I'd write her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. Tell her about your life now. About the children, about us. Let her know you survived despite everything. And if she wants to come here to meet Rose and Samuel, then we'll face that when it comes. Together. That evening, Clara wrote the letter. It was short, factual, but not unkind. She told her mother about the ranch, about Marcus, about becoming sheriff. She included a photograph Tom Morrison had taken of the family on the porch, Clara and Marcus sitting with the children between them, everyone almost smiling. As she sealed the envelope, Rose came in. Who are you writing to, Mama? My mother, your grandmother. Rose's eyes widened. You have a mother. Where is she? Far away, in Philadelphia. Is she nice? Clara considered the question. I don't know anymore. People change. But she loved me once, and that counts for something. Will she come visit? Maybe. Would you like that? Rose thought about it seriously, the way she considered all important questions. If she makes you happy, yes. If she makes you sad, no. What if she does both? Then. Rose frowned, working through the complexity. Then I guess she's family. Family is complicated. Clara hugged her daughter, marveling at the wisdom of children who'd seen too much too young. The night before the wedding, Marcus couldn't sleep. He found himself at the cemetery again, standing before Margaret and Libby's graves. The headstones were clean, now the plot well tended. Clara had planted wildflowers that would bloom come spring. I'm getting married tomorrow, he said to the stones. To a woman you'd probably like. She's nothing like you, Margaret, but she's everything I need now. Strong where I'm weak, fierce when I'm tired. She makes me want to be better than I am. The wind rustled through the pine trees, and for a moment Marcus could almost imagine it was Margaret's voice giving her blessing. I'll always love you, he continued, both of you, but I'm not going to live in the past anymore. Clara and those children, they're my future. I hope you understand. A hand touched his shoulder. Clara stood beside him, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. Too much thinking. About how different my life would be if you hadn't stood on that platform, if I hadn't ridden into town that morning. Fate, Clara said softly. Choice, Marcus countered. I chose to save you. You chose to trust me. We chose this life we're building. And tomorrow we choose it again in front of everyone. Are you ready? Clara looked at the graves, then at Marcus. They were your first family. I'm not trying to replace them. I know. But I'm going to love you with everything I have, and I'm going to make this ranch ring with laughter again. And someday, when we're old and gray, we'll be buried on this hill too, all of us together. One big complicated family. Marcus pulled her close. Margaret would have liked that. She always said the ranch was too quiet with just the three of us. They stood there together, past and present, converging in the quiet cemetery. Tomorrow would bring the wedding, the celebration, the official beginning of their new life. But here, Now in the darkness, with the dead as witnesses, they were already family. "Let's go home," Clara said finally. "Home," Marcus repeated, and the word had never sounded better. As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, neither of them noticed the rider on the distant ridge watching through a spyglass. He'd been sent by Judge Patterson to scout to report back on the woman who'd killed Harrison Wells. But what he saw confused him. Not a murderess and her accomplice, but a family preparing for a wedding, a town united in celebration. He lowered the spyglass decision made. He'd report that Clara Patterson was dead, killed in the shootout with Wells. Let the judge believe his daughter was gone. Let this family have their peace. Sometimes the rider thought as he turned his horse east, mercy came from the strangest places. And sometimes the best gift you could give someone was the freedom to disappear. The ranch house glowed with lamplight as Marcus and Clara went inside. Tomorrow would bring joy and music and new promises. But tonight, in the quiet of their soon-to-be fuller home, they had everything they needed. Each other, the children, and the certain knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The sound of Samuel's cough drifted down from upstairs. Clara started to go to him, but Marcus caught her hand. "I'll go," he said. "You rest. Tomorrow's a big day, Sheriff." She smiled, and in that smile was everything. Gratitude, love, desire, hope. "Don't be long, husband." "Never again." He promised and meant it. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the kind of Wyoming morning that turned breath to crystal and made the mountains look close enough to touch. Clara stood in front of the mirror in Mrs. Morrison's bedroom, barely recognizing herself in the cream silk dress that had been altered to fit her perfectly. Rose sat on the bed behind her, already dressed in blue calico with matching ribbons in her hair. "You look beautiful, Mama," Rose said softly. "I look different." "Different how?" Clara studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror wasn't the desperate mother who'd stood on a hanging platform 2 weeks ago, nor was she the Boston debutante who'd been sold to settle a debt. This was someone new. Sheriff Clara Kane, soon to be married properly to a man she'd chosen in a town that had chosen her back. "Different like I finally match who I'm supposed to be," she said. Mary Morrison bustled in with a bouquet of winter roses and dried lavender. "These just arrived. From Denver, if you can believe it." Clara read the card. "May you find the happiness that was stolen from us. Your friend, Catherine." "The woman who had the documents?" Mary asked. "Yes, she made it safely then." "Thank the Lord. Now let's get this veil situated." The veil had been Margaret's, stored carefully in tissue paper in the attic. Marcus had offered it hesitantly, afraid it might be too much, but Clara had accepted it with grace. It was right, she'd said, that something of the first Mrs. Kane be present at the making of the second. Downstairs, Marcus stood in the parlor, while Tom Morrison and Pete the blacksmith fussed with his appearance. He wore his best suit, the one he'd buried Margaret in his mind, because he'd never thought he'd need it again. Samuel stood beside him in a matching vest Mary had sewn, clutching the rings so tightly his knuckles were white. "You nervous, Papa?" the boy asked. Marcus crouched down to Samuel's level. "A little. Are you? What if I drop the rings? Then we'll pick them up. Nothing that falls can't be picked up again, Sam. Remember that." The church bells began to ring, calling the town to witness. As they walked the short distance to the church, Marcus was amazed to see how many people had come. Not just from Sheridan, but from neighboring settlements. Word had spread about the female sheriff who'd stood against hired killers about the town, that had remembered its courage about the wedding, that was really a new beginning for everyone. Even more surprising were the unexpected guests. Judge Patterson's wife, Clara's mother, had sent a representative with a gift, a silver tea service that had been in the family for generations, smuggled out of the Boston house before the federal agents seized everything. The note simply said, "For new beginnings, CP." But the biggest surprise waited inside the church. Sitting in the back row, hat in his hands, was Sheriff John Daniels from Cheyenne, the territorial capital. Marcus recognized him immediately, as did half the town. This was the man who decided which local sheriffs kept their badges. "Daniels," Marcus said carefully. "Didn't expect to see you here. Heard there was an interesting situation in Sheridan. Female sheriff appointed by town vote. Thought I should see for myself." Daniels stood, extended his hand. "Also heard she took down Harrison Wells with one shot while defending her family. That true, every word. Good. Territory needs more sheriffs who shoot straight and think straighter. The appointment stands if she wants it." Before Marcus could respond, the organ began to play. He took his position at the altar beside Reverend Thompson Samuel, standing proud beside him with the rings. The congregation rose as the doors opened. First came Rose, scattering dried flower petals with serious concentration. Then Clara appeared, and Marcus forgot how to breathe. She walked alone, no one to give her away because she was giving herself, choosing this of her own free will. The borrowed veil couldn't hide the determination in her eyes, or the slight smile playing at her lips. When she reached him, she handed her bouquet to Rose and took both his hands in hers. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Thompson began, but Marcus barely heard the words. He was lost in Clara's eyes, in the promise he saw there. When it came time for the vows, Clara surprised everyone by speaking first. "Marcus Kane," she said, voice clear and strong. "2 weeks ago, you cut a rope from my neck and gave me back my life. But more than that, you gave me back my hope. You showed me that broken things can be mended, that families can be chosen, that love can grow in the most unlikely soil. I promise to stand beside you through whatever storms come. I promise to fill this ranch with laughter again. I promise to love your ghosts as gently as you've loved mine. And I promise that every day for the rest of our lives, I will choose you, choose us, choose this family we're building." Marcus had to clear his throat twice before he could speak. "Clara Patterson, no Clara Kane, because that's who you've always been even before we met. You brought light back into my darkness. You showed me that surviving isn't enough, that living requires courage I'd forgotten I had. I promise to protect you and the children with everything I am. I promise to support your dreams even when they involve wearing a sheriff's badge and revolutionizing law in the territory. I promise to love you, not despite your sharp edges, but because of them. And I promise that this ranch, this life, this family, it's not my gift to you. It's what we build together." When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife properly and legally this time, Marcus kissed Clara like a man who'd been drowning and finally found air. The church erupted in cheers, and Samuel proudly held up the rings he hadn't dropped, and Rose threw her remaining petals with abandon. The reception was held at the ranch tables set up in the barn, which had been decorated with pine boughs and lanterns. The whole town had contributed food: venison stew, fresh bread, preserved fruits, and 3 different cakes because the church ladies couldn't agree on which recipe was best. Sheriff Daniels cornered Clara during the festivities. "So, Sheriff Kane ready for the responsibility?" "I've been ready my whole life, sir. I just didn't know it until now." "There'll be resistance. Not everyone in the territory will accept a female sheriff." "Not everyone accepted a female anything. Hasn't stopped me yet." Daniels laughed. "I like you. Word of advice. First thing you do is hire deputies you trust. You can't do this alone." "I don't intend to." Clara looked across the barn to where Marcus was teaching Billy Watson and some of the younger men a card game. "I've learned the value of not being alone." As the sun set, the party moved outside where a bonfire had been built. Old Pete had brought his fiddle, and Doc Brennan surprised everyone by producing a harmonica. Soon couples were dancing on the packed earth, children running between them laughing. Marcus found Clara standing apart watching Rose teach Samuel a dance step. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I knew was possible. Even with what's coming, your father won't give up just because the federal agents have him cornered." Clara turned to him. Let me tell you something about my father. His power came from isolation, from keeping people separated and afraid. Look around, Marcus. We're not isolated anymore. We're not afraid. We're a community, a family. That's something he never understood and can't fight. As if to prove her point, Tom Morrison approached with a telegram. This just came from Denver. Clara read it, her face going pale, then flushing with triumph. It's from the federal prosecutor. Judge Ezekiel Patterson has been arrested on charges of corruption, murder, conspiracy, and human trafficking. His assets are frozen, his associates arrested. It's over. The news spread through the gathering like wildfire. People cheered, embraced, some cried. The shadow that had hung over them all was lifting, but Clara wasn't celebrating. She stood very still, staring at the telegram. "Clara," Marcus touched her arm. "I should feel something," she said quietly. "Joy, relief, vindication, but all I feel is empty. He was my father. Despite everything, he was my father." "Family is complicated," Marcus said, echoing Rose's words. "You can mourn the father you should have had, while being grateful the one you did have can't hurt you anymore." That night, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Clara and Marcus sat on their porch watching the stars. They could hear music still drifting from town where the celebration continued at the saloon. "I got a letter," Marcus said suddenly. "Yesterday. Didn't want to worry you before the wedding." Clara tensed. "From who?" "A woman named Ellen Hardy. Says she knew Margaret back in California. She's coming through next month with her 2 children. Her husband died in a mining accident. She heard about what we're doing here, about taking in people who need help. Asked if we might have room." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Do we have room? The house is big enough, and Rose has been asking for other children to play with." "You're asking me if we should take in strangers, children who aren't ours." "I'm asking if we should extend the same grace to others that we've given each other. A chance to start over." Clara leaned into him. "Margaret would have said yes, wouldn't she?" "Without hesitation." "Then yes. But Marcus, we can't take in everyone. We're not an orphanage." "No. But we're proof that families can be made, not just born. Maybe that's enough." A week later, Clara officially started her duties as sheriff. Her first act was to hire 2 deputies, Tom Morrison's eldest son Daniel, who just returned from studying law in Denver, and surprisingly Billy Watson, who'd proven himself during the fight with Wells's men. Youth and inexperience, she said, could be assets if properly guided. Her second act was to establish new rules for the jail. Prisoners would work during the day, helping with town repairs, assisting elderly residents, teaching skills to children. The idea was rehabilitation, not just punishment. "You're going to revolutionize law enforcement," Daniel Morrison said admiringly. "I'm going to try," Clara replied. "This town gave me a second chance. Seems only fair to offer the same to others." Not everyone approved. Some of the older ranchers grumbled about a woman giving orders. A few merchants worried that Clara's softer approach would invite lawlessness. But when she tracked down and arrested the Murray gang after they robbed a stagecoach, riding out with Marcus and her deputies, shooting with deadly accuracy when they resisted, the grumbling stopped. "Your wife," Pete told Marcus one evening at the saloon, "is something else." "Yes," Marcus agreed simply. "She is." Winter deepened snow piling high against the buildings. The ranch became a gathering place for the community. Clara held her sheriff's meetings in the large kitchen, people bringing food to share while they discussed town business. Rose and Samuel made friends with other children who came with their parents. The house that had been silent for 3 years now rang with voices, laughter, life. One evening, Clara found Marcus in the study, adding names to the family Bible. Their marriage officially recorded. Rose and Samuel listed as his adopted children. He'd even added a page for Margaret and Elizabeth, keeping them part of the family story. "Room for more names?" Clara asked softly. Marcus looked up. "Are you?" "Not yet, but I went to see Doc Brennan today. He says there's no reason we can't have children of our own. Do you want that, with everything else you're managing? Clara sat in his lap, something that had become a comfortable habit. I want everything with you. Babies and grandbabies and a house so full of family. We have to build an addition. I want to grow old with you on this land, surrounded by the life we've built. Even if your father somehow gets free, even if more men like Wells come, especially then, every child we raise, every person we help, every bit of love we add to this world, it's a victory over men like my father. It's proof that cruelty doesn't win in the end. Marcus kissed her deep and sure. Then we'd better get started on that addition. A month later, Ellen Hardy arrived with her children, twin boys aged 6. They were skinny scared, clutching their mother's skirts. But Samuel immediately took them under his wing, showing them his carved horses, and Rose declared herself their big sister without being asked. You sure about this? Ellen asked Clara nervously. We're strangers to you. So was I to Marcus, Clara replied. Strangers are just family you haven't met yet. That night, with 7 people around the dinner table, the house felt properly full for the first time since Margaret and Libby died. Marcus caught Clara's eye across the table over the heads of chattering children and Ellen's grateful tears, and smiled. This was what redemption looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but daily choices to open doors instead of closing them to build, rather than tear down to choose love over fear. Papa Marcus, one of the twins, said shyly, Miss Rose says you can teach us to ride horses. Marcus felt that word, Papa, settle into his chest like a bird finding its nest. Would you like that? Both boys nodded eagerly. Then we'll start tomorrow. After dinner, as the women cleaned up and the children played by the fire, Marcus stepped onto the porch. The cemetery on the hill was visible in the moonlight, the headstones like guardians watching over the ranch. We did it, Margaret, he whispered to the wind. We made it a home again. And somewhere in the rustle of pine trees and the distant howl of wolves, he could almost hear her answer. I knew you would. Inside, Clara began reading aloud from one of Margaret's books, her voice carrying through the windows. The children gathered around her, even the new boys creeping closer, drawn by the warmth in her voice. Ellen sat mending clothes, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes at the simple kindness of it all. Marcus remained on the porch a moment longer, surveying his domain. The ranch that had been a tomb was now a sanctuary. The town that had shunned him now looked to his wife for justice. The family he'd lost had been replaced, not erased, never that, but added to expanded, made larger and more complex. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more strangers seeking shelter, more criminals to face, more ghosts to lay to rest. But tonight, with his house full of voices and his heart full of hope, Marcus Kane was the richest man in Wyoming territory. He went inside to join his family, all of them, the born and the chosen, the living and the remembered. Claire looked up as he entered, smiled that smile that had saved him, and made room for him beside her. And they lived happily ever after. She was reading. No, Samuel interrupted. That's not real. Nobody lives happily ever after. Clara closed the book, considered the boy's words. You're right. How about this? And they lived, fully and bravely and together, through happiness and sorrow, through ordinary days and extraordinary challenges. They lived. That's better, Rose declared. That's real. Yes, Marcus said, sitting beside his wife, their assembled children spread around them like a living quilt. That's real. And it was. Spring came late that year, and with it came trouble wearing a federal badge. Marshal Raymond Cross arrived on a Tuesday morning, flanked by 6 deputies, their horses fresh and their guns clean. Clara was in her office teaching the Hardy twins their letters when she saw them through the window. Something in the way Cross sat his horse, rigid official cold made her stomach drop. "Boys, run home to your mother," she said quietly. "Tell Mr. Marcus to come to town, quickly." Cross was already tying his horse to the post when Clara stepped onto the boardwalk. He was a tall man, gaunt, with eyes like chips of flint and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. "Sheriff Kane." "Marshal, what brings federal law to Sheridan? Judge Ezekiel Patterson." Clara's hand instinctively moved to her gun. "My father is in federal custody." "Was." Cross pulled out a document. "He escaped 3 weeks ago. Killed 2 guards in the process. We have reason to believe he's heading this way." The world seemed to tilt. Clara gripped the porch rail to steady herself. "How?" "Inside help. Several guards were on his payroll. We didn't know until it was too late." Cross stepped closer. "Sheriff, I need to ask, have you had any contact with your father?" "The last contact I had with my father was when he sent men to kill me and my children. And yet, here you are wearing a badge, married to Marcus Kane, living quite well." "Are you suggesting something?" Marshal Cross's expression didn't change. "I'm suggesting that daughters and fathers have complicated relationships, that blood is thick, that maybe, just maybe, you've been in contact." The cock of a rifle interrupted him. Marcus stood 10 feet away, Winchester aimed at Cross's chest. "Choose your next words very carefully, Marshal." "Mr. Kane, I heard you'd gone soft. Seems I heard wrong." "My wife asked you a question. Are you suggesting she's involved in her father's escape?" "I'm investigating all possibilities." "Then investigate elsewhere." Clara shot the last man her father sent, in front of 20 witnesses. Cross looked between them, calculating. Then he holstered his implied threat, along with his hand on his gun. "We'll be staying in town until we determine Patterson's whereabouts." "I trust that won't be a problem, Sheriff." "Not if you follow the law while you're here," Clara said steadily. After Cross and his men headed to the hotel, Marcus and Clara stood alone in her office. She was trembling just slightly, but enough for him to notice. "He's coming," she said. "My father's coming here. We knew this might happen." "No, we hoped it wouldn't. There's a difference." Clara moved to the window, watching Cross's deputies fan out through town. "He killed guards, Marcus. Federal guards. He's not even pretending to be legitimate anymore. He's just revenge now, pure revenge." That night, they called a town meeting. The church was packed, fear and anger thick in the air. Marshal Cross attended standing in the back like a crow at a funeral. "We've faced threats before," Clara said from the pulpit. "We'll face this one." "This is different," old Pete said. "This is federal business, your family business. Maybe it's time." "Time for what?" Mary Morrison stood up. "Time to abandon the woman who's kept our town safer than it's been in years. Time to turn our backs on our neighbors because it's dangerous to stand with them." "I'm saying maybe Clara should step down, temporarily, until this is resolved." "No." Tom Morrison stood beside his wife. "We voted Clara as sheriff because she's fair and strong and can't be bought. Those qualities don't disappear because her father's a bastard." "Language, Tom." Reverend Thompson chided gently, then added, though accurate. "I'll step down if that's what the town wants," Clara said quietly. "I won't bring danger to—" "You'll do no such thing." Doc Brennan's voice cut through the murmur. "Sheriff Kane, you've treated every drunk thief and troublemaker in this town with more dignity than they deserved. You've turned law enforcement into something respectable. I'll be damned if we let you face this alone." A vote was called. Clara abstained. The result was unanimous. She would remain sheriff, and the town would stand with her. Marshal Cross approached afterward. "Touching display of loyalty. Let's hope it lasts when the bullets start flying." "It will," Marcus said simply. "You seem very sure." "I am. You see, Marshal, you think fear drives people, but love is stronger. These people love Clara because she loved them first when they didn't deserve it. That kind of loyalty doesn't break." Cross studied him. "You've changed Kane. The lawbringer I knew wouldn't have believed in love over fear. The lawbringer you knew hadn't met Clara. 3 days passed in tense quiet. Then the storm broke. It started with fire. The abandoned Murphy place 5 miles outside town went up in flames just after midnight. While everyone rushed to fight, the fire riders hit the town from 3 sides. Windows shattered. Horses screamed. Gunfire erupted like deadly fireworks. Clara was at the jail when it started. She grabbed her rifle and ran into the street to find chaos. Buildings burning, people running. And there, in the middle of Main Street, stood her father. Judge Ezekiel Patterson looked older, grayer, but his eyes burned with the same cold fury she remembered from childhood. He wore expensive clothes, now tattered from weeks on the run, and he held a gun like he'd been born to it. "Hello, daughter." "Father." Clara raised her rifle. "You should have stayed in prison." "Prison?" He laughed, bitter and sharp. "You put me in prison. My own blood. My greatest failure. Your greatest failure was thinking you owned people, including me. I made you everything you were. You made me desperate. Marcus made me sheriff. The difference matters." Patterson's men were spreading through town, but they were meeting resistance. The townspeople, drilled by Clara and Marcus, fought back from windows and rooftops. This wasn't a massacre. It was a battle. "Call off your men," Clara said. "This is between us." "Nothing is just between us anymore. You made sure of that when you chose them over me." Patterson gestured to the town. "When you chose him over your own blood." Marcus appeared from the smoke, moving to stand beside Clara. Rose and Samuel were with Ellen at the ranch, protected by the Morrison boys and Billy Watson. The Hardy twins were hidden in the church cellar with other children. The town had prepared for this. "Judge Patterson," Marcus said calmly, "you're surrounded. Your men are outnumbered. Surrender now, and you might live to see trial." "Trial," Patterson spat. "I've been tried and convicted by my own daughter. The sentence is death, mine or hers." He raised his gun toward Clara. Marcus moved faster, stepping in front of her, but Clara was faster still. She shoved Marcus aside and fired. The shot took Patterson in the shoulder, spinning him around. His gun flew from his hand. He fell to his knees in the muddy street, blood spreading across his expensive shirt. Clara walked toward him, rifle still raised. "You're under arrest for murder escape and assault on a federal officer." Patterson laughed, coughing blood. "You won't shoot me. I'm your father." "You were never my father. You were my owner. There's a difference." She was about to bind his hands when one of Patterson's men hidden on a rooftop took aim at her. The shot rang out, but it wasn't Clara who fell. Rose had run from the ranch, terrified for her mother. She'd arrived just in time to see the gunman, just in time to throw herself at Clara. The bullet, meant for Clara's heart, caught Rose in the chest. "No!" Clara's scream tore through the night. She caught Rose as she fell, cradling her daughter's small body. Blood, too much blood, soaking through the blue dress Rose had worn to the wedding. Marcus roared like a wounded animal, turned and shot the gunman off the roof with terrible precision. Then he was on his knees beside Clara and Rose, pressing his hands to the wound. "Doc!" he shouted. "Doc Brennan!" Rose's eyes fluttered open. "Mama, I'm here, baby. I'm here. Did I save you?" Clara was sobbing. "Yes, sweetheart. You saved me." "Good. That's what family does." Doc Brennan arrived, took one look, and started barking orders. They carried Rose to his office while the battle raged around them. Patterson's men, seeing their leader down, began to scatter. Federal marshals and townspeople gave chase. In the doctor's office, Clara held Rose's hand while Doc Brennan worked. The bullet had missed the heart but nicked a lung. It was bad, but not hopeless. "She's strong," Brennan said, hands steady despite the chaos outside. "She's got her mother's spine." "She's 8 years old," Clara whispered. "She's just a baby." "She's a Cain," Marcus said firmly, "and Cains don't give up." The surgery took 3 hours. 3 hours of Clara praying to a God she'd stopped believing in. 3 hours of Marcus wearing a groove in the floor with his pacing. 3 hours of Samuel crying in Ellen's arms, asking if his sister was going to die. When Brennan finally emerged, exhausted and bloodstained, he nodded once. "She'll live. Barely, but she'll live." Clara collapsed against Marcus' relief and exhaustion finally claiming her. He held her while she shook, whispering promises neither of them could keep about everything being okay. Outside, the battle was over. Patterson was in custody, wounded, but alive. 8 of his men were dead, 3 captured. The town had lost 2 men, Jonathan Pike and Edward Tanner, both young, both brave, both mourned. Marshal Cross found Clara and Marcus at Rose's bedside as dawn broke. "Your father will hang for this." Clara didn't look up from Rose's pale face. "I don't care what happens to him." "You should. He's asking to see you." "No." "Clara," Marcus said gently, "maybe you should. For closure." She looked at him, then at Rose, tiny and fragile in the white sheets. "Will you come with me?" "Always." They found Patterson in a cell, shoulder bandage, looking older than his years. When he saw Clara, something flickered in his eyes. Regret maybe, or just manipulation's last gasp. "She looks like you," he said. "Your daughter. Same stubborn chin." "She's nothing like me. She's brave." "You were brave once, before you let emotion make you weak." Clara stepped closer to the bars. "You want to know what makes me weak, Father? Nothing. Not anymore. You took everything from me, my childhood, my freedom, my innocence. But you gave me something too. You taught me exactly what not to be. I made you strong. No, you made me hard. There's a difference. Marcus taught me strong. Rose taught me brave. This town taught me that power isn't about control. It's about service." Patterson studied her. "You really believe that I live it every day. And when they hang me, will you watch?" Clara turned to leave, then paused. "No, you're already dead to me. Have been for years. The hanging will just make it official." As they walked back to the doctor's office, Marcus took her hand. "You okay?" "I will be. When Rose wakes up. When our family is whole again." "It will be." But it took time. Rose's recovery was slow, painful. She developed a fever that had them all praying again. Her lung collapsed twice. For 2 weeks, Clara barely left her bedside, reading Margaret's books aloud, singing lullabies, making promises about all the things they'd do when Rose was better. The town rallied around them. Food appeared daily. People took shifts sitting with Rose so Clara could rest. Even Marshal Cross, stern and unsmiling, was seen whittling a wooden horse for the brave girl. Ellen Hardy proved invaluable managing the household and the other children with quiet efficiency. "You saved us," she told Clara. "Now let us save you." It was Samuel who was with Rose when she finally woke properly, clear-eyed and hungry. "Mama's gonna cry," he informed his sister solemnly. "Happy tears. The happiest." And he was right. Clara cried when she saw Rose sitting up, eating soup, complaining about being bored. She cried when Rose took her first steps a week later. She cried when Rose asked if she could still learn to shoot properly when she was better. "After what happened, you still want to learn?" Marcus asked. Rose nodded firmly. "The bad man tried to hurt Mama. I stopped him. But next time I want to stop him before he can hurt anyone." "There won't be a next time," Clara said. "Maybe not for us, but there's always someone who needs protecting. That's what you taught me, Mama. That's what being sheriff means." Patterson was tried and hanged on a cold Thursday morning. Clara didn't attend, but Marcus did, standing as witness to the end of an era. Patterson's last words were reportedly about his daughter, not an apology, but a prediction. "She'll become me eventually. Blood always tells." Marcus had responded loud enough for everyone to hear, "She'll become better than either of us could imagine. Love always wins." The aftermath was complicated. Federal investigators came through documenting Patterson's crimes, uncovering more victims. Several officials back east were arrested. The Patterson fortune, built on blood and coercion, was distributed among his victims. Claire refused her portion, asking it be used to establish a fund for abandoned women and children. "You could be wealthy," Cross told her before leaving. Your father's legitimate businesses were worth millions. I am wealthy, Clara replied, watching through the window as Rose and Samuel played with the Hardy twins, Marcus teaching them all to rope. Just not in ways that can be counted. Cross tipped his hat. Sheriff Kane, it's been an education watching you work. The territory needs more lawmen like you. Law women, Clara corrected with a smile. That too. As spring finally arrived properly with wildflowers blooming where blood had been spilled, the town of Sheridan found itself forever changed. They'd faced evil together and won. They'd protected their own. They'd proven that community was stronger than corruption. The ranch expanded. 2 more families arrived seeking shelter and stayed to build homes on the property. Marcus started raising horses seriously with Samuel as his eager assistant. Clara continued as sheriff with Rose, often at her side, learning the law by watching her mother practice it with wisdom and mercy. One evening, as the extended family gathered for dinner, 12 people now around a table built to seat 20, Ellen Hardy raised a toast. To the Kanes, she said, who taught us that family isn't about blood? It's about choosing to stand together when standing alone would be easier. To standing together, they all echoed. Later on the porch, Claire and Marcus watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. Rose was reading to the younger children. Samuel was showing off his new roping skills. The house rang with laughter and arguments and life. We did it, Clara said softly. We survived him. We did more than survive. We thrived despite him. Do you think it's over? Really over? Marcus pulled her closer. That chapter is, but our story that's just beginning. Clara smiled, leaning into his warmth. Good, I like our story. Even the hard parts, especially those, they're what make the good parts shine. As darkness fell and stars emerged one by one like promises, the Kane Ranch settled into peaceful evening. In the cemetery on the hill, Margaret and Libby's graves were decorated with fresh flowers. Rose's daily ritual. The past honored the present, cherished the future bright with possibility. They'd faced their worst nightmare and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. The crisis had passed. Now came the rebuilding, the growing, the living of ordinary days that would become in time extraordinary memories. The foundation was solid, built on love, tested by fire, proven by sacrifice. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had everything else, together. Summer arrived with a gentleness that felt like apology for the violent spring. The bullet wound in Rose's chest had healed to a pink scar she wore like a badge of honor, telling anyone who'd listen how she'd saved her mama from a bad man. The town had rebuilt what was burned stronger than before, and Clara's position as sheriff was now carved in stone, literally on a plaque outside the jail that read, Sheriff Clara Kane, Justice with Mercy. But the real resurrection was happening at the ranch. Marcus stood in the new barn, twice the size of the old one, watching as 20 horses moved in the corral. What had started as a desperate plan to provide security had become something more. The Kane Ranch was now the primary supplier of horses to the territorial cavalry, a contract that meant steady income and respect. Papa Marcus, one of the Hardy twins, ran in. There's a wagon coming. Lots of people. Marcus walked out to see a sight that stopped him cold. 3 wagons loaded with furniture supplies and people. At the lead was a woman in her 50s, elegant despite the dust of travel, with Clara's same green eyes. Catherine Patterson had come to Wyoming. Clara emerged from the house, froze on the porch. Mother and daughter stood looking at each other across 20 yards and 20 years of silence. I know I should have written first, Catherine said, stepping down from the wagon. But I was afraid you'd tell me not to come. Why did you... Clara's voice was carefully neutral. Because I'm dying. Catherine said it simply without drama. Cancer, the doctors say, 6 months, maybe less. And I want to spend them knowing my daughter and grandchildren, if you'll let me. Rose, never one for careful contemplation, ran forward. "You're my grandmother, my real grandmother." Catherine looked down at the girl, tears in her eyes. "If your mother allows it, yes." Rose turned to Clara. "Mama." Clara looked at Marcus, who gave her the smallest nod. "Your choice," his eyes said. "Always your choice." "Come inside," Clara said finally. "We'll talk." The wagons, it turned out, contained more than just Catherine. She'd brought 3 women with her, former victims of Judge Patterson who'd been living in her Philadelphia house. "I've been finding them," Catherine explained over coffee in the kitchen. "The women Ezekiel hurt, giving them shelter, work, dignity. It's not enough, not nearly, but it's something." "And you brought them here?" Clara asked. "They want to start over, fresh." I hoped this might be a place for that." Marcus and Clara exchanged glances. The ranch was becoming a sanctuary, it seemed, whether they'd planned it or not. "We have room," Marcus said simply. "Question is whether they're willing to work. Ranch life isn't easy." "Neither was surviving my father," Clara said, making her decision. "They can stay." The integration wasn't smooth. Catherine was educated, refined, completely unprepared for frontier life. She couldn't cook over a wood stove, was terrified of horses, and nearly fainted when she had to help butcher a chicken. But she tried with a determination that reminded everyone of Clara. It was Rose who broke through first, as she always did. She appointed herself Catherine's guide to ranch life, teaching her grandmother with patient exasperation. "No, grandmother, you can't pet the bull. He's not friendly like the horses. But he looks so gentle. That's how he tricks you. Mama says looks can be deceiving. You should know that better than anyone." Catherine laughed, surprised. "You're right, I should." The other women settled in easier. Sarah, barely 20, took to the gardens. Martha became Ellen's assistant with the household. Jane, the oldest at 40, surprised everyone by being an excellent horse trainer, having grown up on a farm before Patterson destroyed her life. "You're building something here," Catherine told Clara one evening as they watched the extended household at dinner. 15 people now laughing and arguing and living. Something I never could have imagined. "We're building what should have been," Clara replied. "What could have been if Father hadn't been who he was." "Do you hate me for not protecting you?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. "I did. For years I hated you for being weak. Then I became a mother, and I understood. Sometimes weakness isn't a choice. Sometimes it's all you have left after someone breaks you." "He never broke you." "No. But he tried. The difference is I had Marcus. I had this town. I had people who stood with me. You had no one." Catherine wiped her eyes. "I want to make amends, not just to you, but to everyone Ezekiel hurt. I've brought all the money I could access. His hidden accounts, things the federal agents didn't find. It should go to building something good." That's how the idea for the school was born. Not just any school, a proper academy for girls and boys with real teachers from back east, free to anyone who wanted to learn. Clara proposed it at the next town meeting, Catherine offering to fund it entirely. "Education is power," Clara said from the podium. "My father knew that, which is why he denied it to so many. We're going to give it back." The vote was unanimous. Construction began immediately. The school would be built on Cane land, a symbol of how private generosity could serve public good. Marcus supervised the building, Samuel his constant shadow learning arithmetic by calculating board feet and angles. Rose, still recovering, but determined, organized the children to help where they could. She'd inherited her mother's gift for leadership, keeping the younger ones in line with a combination of stern looks and promised rewards. "She's going to be sheriff someday," Catherine observed, watching Rose direct a group of boys twice her size. "God help the criminals," Clara laughed. As summer turned to autumn, the school rose from the ground like a promise. 2 stories, 6 classrooms, a library that would hold the books from Margaret's collection, and hundreds more Catherine had brought from Philadelphia. The day before the school's opening, Catherine collapsed. Doc Brennan was honest in his assessment. Weeks, not months. I'm sorry. Catherine took it with grace. I've had more time than I deserved, more forgiveness than I earned. She insisted on attending the school's opening, though she had to be carried in a chair. The entire town turned out children scrubbed clean and dressed in their best, parents proud and nervous about this new thing. Education for all, not just the wealthy. The first teacher, Miss Amanda Cooper from Boston, was one of Catherine's finds, a woman who'd lost her position when she'd refused a judge's advances. She stood at the front of the main classroom, looking at the 30 eager faces before her. Education, she began, is not about making you into what others want. It's about discovering who you truly are. Catherine lived 2 more weeks long enough to see the school functioning, to hear children reciting lessons, to watch Rose help younger students with their letters. She died on a quiet Tuesday morning, Clara holding one hand, Rose the other. Her last words were to Rose, "Be stronger than we were." Rose, tears streaming down her face, nodded. "I will, grandmother, I promise." They buried Catherine in the cemetery on the hill next to Margaret and Libby. It seemed right somehow. The woman who'd failed to protect her daughter resting beside the woman who'd shown Marcus how to love again. Both part of the story that had led to this moment. The funeral was attended by everyone in town, plus people from neighboring settlements who'd heard about the school. Reverend Thompson spoke about redemption, about how the ending of a story could rewrite its beginning. Catherine Patterson spent 20 years in an asylum for defending her daughter, he said. She could have emerged bitter, broken, seeking revenge. Instead, she sought reconciliation. She used her remaining time and resources to build something that will educate generations. That is the true defeat of evil, when its victims choose to create good. After the funeral, life settled into new rhythms. The school thrived with children walking miles to attend. Miss Cooper proved gifted at recognizing potential in the most unlikely students. A boy who couldn't read but could calculate complex equations in his head. A girl who struggled with English but wrote poetry in Spanish that made grown men cry. Clara continued as sheriff, but her role evolved. She spent as much time mediating disputes and counseling troubled youth as she did enforcing law. Her office became a place where people came for advice, for help, for hope. "You're more priest than sheriff these days," Marcus teased one evening. "Maybe that's what sheriff should mean," Clara replied. "Shepherd of the community, not just its sword." The ranch prospered. The horse business grew, with Samuel showing real talent for breeding and training. The boy who'd once been too frightened to speak now confidently negotiated with cavalry officers twice his age. Rose, fully recovered, became Clara's unofficial deputy, despite being only 9. She had an uncanny ability to detect lies and a moral compass that pointed true north. When Clara had to travel to the territorial capital for sheriff meetings, Rose held court in the office, solving children's disputes with Solomon-like wisdom. "She's you," Marcus told Clara one night, "but without the pain that shaped you. She's better than me. She's what I could have been if I'd been loved from the start." The women Catherine had brought integrated fully into the community. Sarah married Tom Morrison's eldest son. Martha started a bakery that had people traveling from 3 towns over. Jane became Marcus's business partner, her horse training skills legendary throughout the territory. Ellen Hardy found love again with Doc Brennan's widowed son, a quiet man who adored her boys and treated them as his own. Their wedding was the event of the season, with Rose as flower girl and Samuel as ring bearer, roles they performed with serious dedication. One evening in late autumn, as the first snow began to fall, Clara found Marcus in the graveyard placing fresh flowers on all the graves, Margaret's, Libby's, and now Catherine's. "You do this every week," she said. "They're all part of our story. The dead deserve remembrance. Even my mother who failed me for so long. Especially her. She found courage at the end. That's worth honoring." Clara knelt beside him, arranging the flowers more artfully. "Do you think they know the dead? What we've built here. I think love transcends death. So yes, they know. As they walked back to the house, warm light spilling from windows, children's voices raised in laughter, Clara stopped to look back at the cemetery. We've come so far from that day on the hanging platform. That wasn't the beginning, Marcus said. That was just when our stories intersected. What was the beginning then? Every broken moment that led us to each other. Every loss that taught us to value what we found. Every scar that reminded us we survived. Clara leaned into him. And the ending. There isn't one. Not really. We'll die someday, be buried on that hill. But what we've built, this family, this community, this hope, that continues. Rose will carry it forward. Samuel, all the children we've taught that broken doesn't mean worthless. They entered the house to find organized chaos. Rose was teaching the latest arrivals, 2 orphan sisters from Denver, the house rules. Samuel was helping with homework. Ellen was orchestrating dinner for 18. The Hardy twins were playing with a litter of puppies someone had abandoned at the sheriff's office. "Mama," Rose called out, "the Garrett family wants to board their horses here for the winter. I told them our rates, but they want to negotiate." "Let them talk to Samuel. He handles the horse business now." Samuel puffed up with pride, then immediately tried to look serious and businesslike. Also, Rose continued, "Mrs. Weatherby says someone's been stealing pies from her windowsill. Should I investigate? After dinner, criminals can wait for dessert." As Clara moved through the house, helping where needed, mediating small disputes, distributing hugs and gentle corrections, she marveled at how natural it felt. This chaos, this noise, this constant demand for attention and decision. It was everything her father would have hated, which made it perfect. Later, after the children were in bed and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Clara and Marcus sat on the porch, despite the cold, wrapped in a single blanket, watching snow fall on the land they'd claimed through love rather than law. Marcus, I'm pregnant. He turned so fast he nearly fell off the bench. What? Doc Brennan confirmed it today, due in spring. Marcus's hand went to her still flat stomach wonder on his scarred face. A baby. Our baby. Seems fitting, doesn't it, spring new life after all this death? Everything about you is fitting, Clara Kane. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined over the promise of new life. In the house behind them, their collected family slept safe. In the cemetery on the hill, their dead rested peaceful. In the town below, people planned for tomorrow, knowing the law would be fair. They'd started with nothing but pain and determination. They'd built something that would outlast them all. What do you want to name it? Marcus asked. The baby. If it's a girl, Hope. If it's a boy, James. After your first husband. After a weak man who did one strong thing, he died rather than let them use me. He deserves to be remembered for his best moment, not his worst. Marcus kissed her temple. You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. It had to grow to fit all of you in it. As they headed inside, Clara paused to look once more at their domain. The ranch, the school, the town lights in the distance. We did it, Marcus. We rebuilt from ashes. No, he corrected gently. We built something entirely new. Something neither of us could have imagined when we were broken and alone. What would you call it then? Marcus smiled, pulling her close. Home. And it was. Spring arrived with Clara's labor pains. It was a difficult birth, 20 hours of agony that had Doc Brennan worried and Marcus pacing holes in the floor. Rose refused to leave her mother's side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement with a maturity beyond her 9 years. You saved me from a bullet, Rose said firmly. I'm saving you from this. When the baby finally came, a girl healthy and loud, the entire household erupted in celebration. The sound carried across the ranch, bringing everyone running. Samuel was the first to meet his new sister, approaching the bundle in Clara's arms with the same careful reverence he showed Marcus's horses. "She's so small," he whispered. "You were smaller," Clara told him, exhausted but radiant. "And look at you now." "What's her name?" Clara looked at Marcus, who nodded. They'd decided together, but she would speak it first. "Hope Margaret Kane." Margaret for the woman who'd first made this house a home. Hope for what she represented, the future they'd all built together. Ellen Hardy now, Ellen Brennan wept openly. "It's perfect." The news spread through Sheridan like wildfire. The sheriff had given birth. The Kane family had grown. By evening, gifts were arriving. Blankets, carved toys, enough food to feed an army. The town was celebrating one of their own. Even Marshal Cross, passing through on federal business, stopped to pay respects. "Congratulations, Sheriff. Though I don't know how you'll manage a baby in a badge." "The same way I manage everything else," Clara replied, hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. "With help from my family." Cross looked around the room. At Rose, organizing gifts with military precision, Samuel reading to the younger children, the Hardy twins helping Ellen with dinner, various rescued women and children, all moving with the easy familiarity of belonging. "This isn't a family," he observed. "It's a small nation." "Nations are built on laws," Marcus said. "Families are built on love." "And you have both." "We do." As hope grew, so did everything else. The school added 2 more teachers and a second building. The ranch expanded to 100 horses with contracts extending into Colorado. Clara's reputation as a sheriff spread, drawing visits from lawmen wanting to learn her methods of rehabilitation over punishment. By Hope's first birthday, the transformation was complete. The Kane Ranch had become the unofficial heart of the territory, a place where the lost found direction, where the broken found healing, where justice meant more than vengeance. That summer brought an unexpected visitor, a young woman expensively dressed but travel-worn, arriving in a private carriage with armed escorts. She introduced herself as Victoria Ashford, daughter of a Philadelphia banking family. "I've come to study your methods," she announced to Clara. "I want to establish similar sanctuaries in other territories." "This isn't a sanctuary," Clara corrected. "It's a working ranch that happens to help people. That's exactly what makes it replicable. It's sustainable." Victoria stayed 3 months documenting everything: the school's curriculum, the rehabilitation programs at the jail, the way the ranch integrated newcomers. She worked alongside everyone, learning by doing, earning blisters and respect in equal measure. "You've created something unprecedented," she told Clara before leaving. "A model for how communities can heal themselves." "We didn't create anything," Clara replied. "We just stopped destroying things. Sometimes that's enough." Victoria's work bore fruit. Within a year, similar programs were starting in 3 other territories, all based on what she called the Sheridan model: justice with mercy education, without discrimination community through inclusion. Rose, now 11, had begun accompanying Clara on her sheriff duties regularly. She had her mother's sharp mind and her father's steady nerves, but something else too: a gift for seeing people's potential rather than their problems. When she caught Jimmy Morrison stealing from the general store, she didn't arrest him. Instead, she made him work in the store every afternoon, learning bookkeeping from Tom Morrison. "Why?" Clara asked her. "Because he's good with numbers, Mama." He was calculating prices in his head faster than Mr. Morrison could write them down. He wasn't stealing because he's bad. He was bored. Jimmy Morrison went on to become the town's youngest bank manager, but that was years later. Samuel, at 13, was running much of the horse operation. He'd developed a reputation for being able to gentle the wildest animals, speaking to them in whispers that somehow reached past fear to trust. "Where did you learn that?" Marcus asked him once. "From you," Samuel replied simply. "It's how you spoke to Mama when she first came here. Quiet and steady until the fear went away." The observation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He hadn't realized the boy had been watching so closely, learning lessons from moments Marcus hadn't known were teaching. Hope was walking now, toddling between family members with the confidence of someone who'd never known anything but love. She had Clara's green eyes and Marcus's determined chin, but her temperament was entirely her own, sunny laughing, bringing light wherever she went. "She's nothing like either of us," Clara observed one evening, watching Hope charm even the grumpiest visitors to the sheriff's office. "She's everything we couldn't be," Marcus replied, unburdened by the past. That autumn brought the 5-year anniversary of Clara's near hanging. The town decided to mark it with what they called Redemption Day, a celebration of second chances. It became an annual tradition, with people sharing stories of how their lives had changed, how the community had helped them start over. Old Pete the blacksmith stood up that first year. "I was ready to let them hang an innocent woman because I was afraid. This town taught me courage comes from standing together." Jake Colby sober now for 3 years. "Sheriff Kane arrested me 17 times, never gave up on me. That's why I'm alive today." One by one they testified, not in a court of law, but in the court of community, bearing witness to transformation. Even Rayleigh returned that day, hat in hand, asking for the forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. Clara granted it publicly, though Marcus noticed her hand on her gun until the former sheriff left town again. "Some things you forgive, but don't forget," she told him later. "Like your father, I never forgave him. I just stopped letting him matter." Winter came early and harsh that year, but the ranch was ready. They'd built additional shelter for the horses, expanded the house, again laid in supplies for the 23 people, now calling the ranch home. During the worst blizzard in memory, they sheltered 40 townspeople whose homes couldn't withstand the storm. For 3 days, the ranch house was packed wall to wall, with people sharing food warmth stories. Children played together regardless of their family's social standing. Adults who'd never spoken found themselves deep in conversation. "This is what heaven looks like," Reverend Thompson said, watching the organized chaos. "Not golden streets, but people choosing to care for each other." When spring finally came, it brought news that would change everything again. The territorial governor wanted Clara to run for territorial judge. A woman judge. Clara laughed when the letter arrived. "They'll never confirm it." "They confirmed you as sheriff," Marcus pointed out. "That was different. That was one town. This would be the whole territory. You'd be good at it. I'd have to travel, be away from home. Home will be here when you get back. Always." Clara studied the letter for days, discussing it with everyone. Rose was enthusiastically in favor. Samuel worried about her safety. Hope just wanted Mama's stay, repeated endlessly. It was Ellen who provided clarity. "You've spent years showing this town how to heal. Maybe it's time to show the territory." The campaign was brutal. Newspapers ran cartoons of Clara in judge's robes with a baby on her hip and a gun in her hand. Opposition speakers called her everything from uppity to unnatural. But everywhere Clara went, she found allies. Women who'd been denied justice. Men who'd been reformed rather than simply punished. Children who'd been educated at schools based on the Sheridan model. The confirmation vote was closer than anyone liked, but Clara Kane became the first female territorial judge in American history. "How does it feel?" a reporter asked her. "Like responsibility," Clara answered. "Nothing more, nothing less." She set up her judicial chambers in Sheridan, refusing to relocate to the capital. "Justice should be accessible," she said, "not hidden in marble buildings." Her first major case was a murder trial, a woman who'd killed her husband after years of abuse. The prosecutor wanted hanging. The town wanted mercy. Clara found a third way. "Guilty of manslaughter, not murder," she ruled. Sentenced 5 years working at the Women's Sanctuary in Denver, helping other abused women find freedom without violence. It set a precedent that rippled across the country. Justice could be creative. Punishment could be productive. Law could serve healing rather than just retribution. Years passed. The children grew. Rose became, as predicted, Sheridan's youngest sheriff at 21, appointed unanimously by a town that had watched her grow up serving others. Samuel took over the ranch operations, entirely expanding into cattle as well as horses, employing dozens of locals. Hope surprised everyone by wanting to become a doctor, studying under Doc Brennan and his son before heading east to medical school. One of the first women admitted, "You sure about this?" Clara asked her youngest the night before she left. "You taught me to be sure about everything I do," Hope replied. "To choose with my whole heart, or not at all." Marcus's hair was completely gray, now his movements slower but still sure. He spent his days teaching the newest arrivals to ride, to shoot, to stand tall, despite their bent backs. "You've become the elder statesman," Clara teased him one evening. "Better than the angry hermit I was heading toward." They were sitting on the same porch where they'd planned their second wedding all those years ago. The view had changed. More buildings, more fences, more signs of life. But the mountains remained eternal and watching. "Any regrets?" Clara asked. "How could I regret the path that led me to you? Even the pain, especially the pain. It taught me to value the absence of it." A rider approached. A young woman, heavily pregnant, clearly running from something. She dismounted at the gate, looking scared but determined. "Is this the Kane Ranch, where they take people in?" Claire and Marcus exchanged glances. Even now, after all these years, they still came. The lost, the broken, the desperate. "It is," Clara said, standing. "Come in. You're safe now." As they helped the woman inside, Rose appeared from the sheriff's office. Samuel from the barns, Hope's last letter from medical school tucked in Clara's pocket. The family gathered as they always did to welcome another soul in need of saving. "Why do you do it?" the woman asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why help strangers?" Clara looked at Marcus, at her children, at the ranch that had become a symbol of hope across the territory. "Because someone once helped us when we were strangers," she said simply. And that made all the difference. Later that night, after the new arrival was settled, fed and assured of sanctuary, the family gathered for their evening meal. 4 generations now, if you counted old Pete's grandchildren who spent more time at the ranch than at home. Marcus stood to make a toast, as he did every year on this date, the anniversary of the day he'd ridden into Sheridan and seen Clara on that platform. "To the rope that didn't drop," he said, raising his glass. "To the shot that saved a life. To the town that remembered its courage. To the family we chose and the family that chose us. To second chances," Clara added, "and third and fourth, and as many as it takes." "To redemption," Rose said. "To hope," said Hope. "To home," Samuel concluded. They drank. Water for the children, whiskey for the adults, all of it tasting like grace. Outside, the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the cemetery on the hill, the graves were decorated with fresh flowers. Margaret and Libby Catherine, and now others who'd found their final rest in this place of second chances. The Kane Ranch stood as testament to a simple truth, that love was stronger than law, that chosen family could heal what blood family had broken, that redemption was always possible for those brave enough to reach for it. Clara looked around the table at the faces gathered there, some related by blood, most by choice, all by love. This was what victory looked like, not conquest or domination, but connection. Not perfection, but persistence. "Tell us the story, Mama," Hope said, as she did every year. "Tell us how it all began." Clara smiled, settling into her chair, Marcus's hand finding hers under the table. "It began with a rope and a rifle. She started as she always did, with a woman who refused to break and a man who refused to let her fall." The story would go on for hours, with everyone adding their parts, arguing over details, laughing at moments that had once brought tears. It would end as it always did, with Marcus's words, "And they lived." Not happily ever after. That was for fairy tales. They lived fully. They lived bravely. They lived together. And in the end, That was the only ending that mattered. The ranch stood through storms and seasons, through losses and victories, through the changing of laws and the changing of hearts. It stood as proof that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply refuse to let cruelty have the last word. Love would have the last word. Always. And so it did. As the stars emerged over Wyoming territory, the Kane Ranch settled into sleep. But its legacy was just beginning. Across the territory, across the nation, the story spread of a woman who'd been condemned to hang and instead became a judge of a broken man who'd found wholeness in service to others, of a community that had chosen courage over comfort. They'd written a different ending than the one the world had planned for them. And that, perhaps, was the greatest redemption of all.